By month 18, my brother was hauling materials on a job site. The glossy brand persona gone the McLaren out of his life and the company no longer his to parade. I am 32. My name is Samantha Park, Vice President of Marketing at a New York fintech. And for most of my life, I thought I understood garden variety favoritism. I did not understand weaponized entitlement until my own family tried to make my competence their permanent safety net. What they did not know was that I had already put a quiet, legal step-by-step plan in motion. If you have ever been the responsible one who gets blamed anyway, tell me where you are watching from and what city taught you about boundaries. I read the comments. Here's the ground truth. I grew up in a Boston suburb with a script we never said out loud. Family over everything. Translation over me. Brandon, my older brother by 7 years, was the golden child, a born headline chasing a spotlight. Kyle, the youngest, was the idea guy on a couch full of opinions and short on alarm clocks. Callie, my sister, was the one person who knew how to ask, "Are you okay?" before asking for anything else. I was the responsible one. I got good at being useful and quiet. I paid my way through school. I learned to speak the language of quarterly targets and product roadmaps. I learned that performance reviews are easier to pass than emotional tests at the dinner table. Then the day came when my restricted stock finally did what it was designed to do. After taxes and the end of the lockup, my windfall was $12.8 million. I hired a lawyer. I hired a financial advisor. I built a plan. And I told no one. Not my parents, not Brandon, not Kyle, not even Callie. The circle of knowledge had 2 people in suits and me. That decision was not paranoia. It was self-preservation. In my family, money did not solve problems. It fed expectations. If you listen closely, you can already hear the first breadcrumbs. 1, the Ring doorbell on my apartment door in Queens because cameras remember when hearts do not. 2, a private Slack channel I named Receipts where I dropped screenshots and dates before my brain could talk me into minimizing anything. 3, a folder in my notes app titled Sunlight because the truth behaves better in public than in shadows. I am telling you this now so that when we get to payoffs later, nothing will feel like a trick. Documentation is not drama. Documentation is dignity. I kept working like nothing had changed because on the outside, nothing had. I hit my numbers. I built teams. I said no to shiny distractions. Brandon, meanwhile, was online in mirrored sunglasses, filming job sites, and captioning grind harder, selling the dream of a luxury remodel empire. My parents shared his posts with a pride they rarely found from my quiet wins. Kyle had a theory for everything and a plan for nothing, which in our living room somehow counted as potential. I do not say this with bitterness. I say it with data. Looking back, the ledger was simple. I sent money, they sent advice. So here is what sets the tone for everything that follows. I am not a screamer. I do not throw glasses. I am not here to make you love me for being loud. I am here to show you how calm, careful preparation can rearrange a story that was written without your consent. I do not weaponize secrets. I weaponize facts. That matters because later when I record a conversation, I do it only in New York where one-party consent applies, and I do it after calling my attorney, not because I need spectacle, but because I refuse confusion. You should also know the roles before we move. I am the narrator and the responsible one who finally stops auditioning for approval. Brandon is the golden child whose confidence is real on camera and brittle on paper. Kyle is the innocent in his own mind and the bystander in mine. Callie is the validator and eventually the anchor. There will be a revealer you have not met yet, and there will be a room full of relatives who will learn what sunlight looks like when it lands on receipts. Keep those in your mental cast list. Every player has a purpose. I promised a hook, so here's the rest of it. By month 18, the person who once offered me a $12 an hour cleaning shift to teach me humility was clocking in for someone else while I locked the bay doors at a shop I rebuilt with procedure, not rage. You will see exactly how the dominoes fell. But first you need to know the pattern I lived inside, because without the pattern, the betrayal looks like a surprise. It was not a surprise, it was the next expected step. And that is where we are headed. In the next part, I will show you the years of small sacrifices that trained me to say yes, the family math that never balanced, and the first quiet test that told me everything I needed to know. Keep listening. The breadcrumbs are already on the table. We left off with the breadcrumbs on the table. Now I want to slow down and show you how the pattern got built, because without the pattern, the later choices might look harsh. With it, they make sense. I grew up in a Boston suburb where the motto was family over everything, even when that meant me at the bottom. at the bottom of the totem pole. It was not said as a threat. It was sung like a hymn. Brandon, my older brother by about 7 years, was the headliner. Kyle, my youngest brother, was the idea guy who would be brilliant any day now. Callie, my sister, had a soft voice and a spine of steel, the only person who ever looked me in the eye before asking for help. And me, I was the reliable one. I did the invisible work that makes a house a holiday, a crisis, and a reputation look effortless. When I say invisible work, I do not mean making casseroles. I mean wires and numbers. I mean learning the tax calendar so my parents did not get penalized for late payments. I mean calling the county when the property tax adjustment arrived and they were short by a few hundred, then sending a transfer before dinner so nobody had to feel awkward at dessert. I mean paying for Kyle's therapy for 3 months because he promised he would go, then realizing he missed half the sessions and thought the copay was a suggestion. I mean fronting Brandon's payroll once when a client's check was mysteriously delayed, writing a tidy wire for $22,000 because he said he would pay me back in a week. He did not. He said that was family equity, and I should be proud to be part of the mission. Looking back now, I can see how easy it is to mistake competence for obligation. The better I got at my job, the more normal it felt for me to be the emergency fund for people who had better stories than spreadsheets. My career moved. First manager, then director, then vice president at a fintech in New York. I learned how to pitch, how to read a funnel, how to write a positioning line that moves a market. The raises came with new targets, and with them came new asks at home. The amounts went from small to serious. By the time I hit my stride, I was sending about $18,000 a month on average to cover gaps that were never described as gaps, only as opportunities to show up. That was roughly 36% of my monthly net. On paper, I could afford it. In my body, I could not. Here is how it sounded in real life. My mother on the phone, sweet and tired, saying, "Honey, we did not want to bother you, but the roof guy came back and said it is more than we thought." My father saying, "We are on a fixed income, and your brother is an entrepreneur. He needs runway. We all need to pull together." Brandon texting me a screenshot of a supplier invoice labeled urgent, followed by the words, "Can you float this?" Kyle sending me a link to a crypto white paper and a Venmo request with the caption, "Lunch and research." I want to be fair. None of it arrived with a fist. It arrived with a smile and a memory. Remember when we helped you move into your dorm? Remember when Brandon drove you to the airport? Remember when Kyle fixed your laptop? Family math, emotional interest compounded monthly. Looking back now, I remember the first time I said no. It was small. Brandon wanted me to redesign his logo. Not my job, not my skill, but he wanted the VP touch. I said I could recommend an agency. He sighed and said it would mean more if it came from me. I heard the line under the line. "If you love us, do it yourself." I sent the agency's contact anyway. He did not hire them. He posted on Instagram the next week about how some people change when they get fancy titles. The comments were full of hand claps and fire emojis. I turned off my phone and walked around the block until my face cooled down. The pattern was not just about money. It was about the story of who we were allowed to be. Brandon was allowed to reinvent. He tried luxury remodeling, then podcasting about hustle. Then a consulting offer he said he could not refuse. Kyle was allowed to explore. He was learning to code, then studying markets, then considering joining a startup if the culture was right. Callie was allowed to be kind, which meant allowed to be tired. I was allowed to be useful. When I tried to be anything else, the air got thin. At work, I was praised for clarity. At home, clarity was insubordination. I learned to translate. I would say, "I love you," and then I would attach a budget. I would say, "I cannot do that," and then I would offer a smaller version. Every no had to be wrapped in a yes to survive the dinner table. There were bright spots. When my company announced the path to an initial public offering, I felt for the first time like the math could finally settle. I had restricted stock units vesting on a schedule. I had a lockup to respect. I hired a lawyer. I hired a financial advisor. After taxes, when the lockup ended, the windfall was $12.8 million. I could breathe. And then I could not. Because I could already hear the story being written about that money, and I knew if I told my family, none of it would be mine. Not the dollars, not the decisions, not the story. So I kept it to myself. Not because I wanted to punish anyone, because I wanted to see the truth. The truth is quieter than a celebration. It is also clearer. When people think you have nothing, their choices are honest. When people think you have everything, their demands get dressed up as destiny. That is when the sacrifices started to look different to me. The monthly support I had been sending was not a bridge, it was a system. The system said I collected achievement and they collected benefits. The system said my promotions were a family plan. The system said my worth was in my utility. And if I stopped being useful, I would learn how quickly love can be rebranded as selfishness. Let me give you examples because specifics matter more than adjectives. One Thanksgiving, Brandon arrived late and left early, but not before asking me to review his investor deck for a new line of high-end outdoor kitchens. He wanted me to validate the market size and polish the narrative. I did it after the dishes because I was trained to be the closer. The next month, he posted the deck to LinkedIn with a caption about solo grind and no days off. My name was not mentioned. Another time, Kyle promised to help our parents with basic chores for a month if I paid his car insurance. He did week 1. He forgot week 2. By week 3, our mother was doing his list while telling me on the phone that Kyle's heart was so big. I wanted to ask if heart size comes with a calendar. I am not painting myself as a saint. I said yes more than I should. I said yes because it worked. The roof got fixed. The invoice got paid. The family text thread stayed smiley for another week. The cost was invisible until it was not. Sleep got weird. Food turned into fuel instead of joy. I started resenting holidays. If you have ever done logistics for love, you know that feeling. Looking back now, the moment that changed the light was small, quiet, and almost nothing. I caught myself apologizing to my father for not answering a call during a work presentation. He said we just missed you, but also Brandon had a question about a loan application and needed your social security number. He had put me on a form without asking because we are family and it would be faster that way. I did not yell. I froze. Then I said, no, do not sign anything with my name on it. He said I was making a big deal out of paperwork. That was the day I opened a folder in my Notes app and named it Sunlight. Here is where those breadcrumbs I mentioned start to matter. I already had the Ring camera at my apartment in Queens. I already had the private Slack channel I called Receipts. Into those buckets, I started dropping facts. Dates, amounts, screenshots, text threads labeled family over everything, and group chats where jokes about my supposed big city ego were mixed with requests for money. The goal was not to build a case in court. The goal was to tell the truth to myself without editing. As the file grew, the pattern became harder to deny. Brandon's business looked louder than it was solvent. The cars in his videos were leased through corporate structures. The captions were pure confidence. The invoices were pure chaos. My parents' phrase, "we will pray," had become a banner they waved when they wanted me to accept the outcome they had already chosen. Kyle's latest plan always required a small infusion now for a larger return later. Callie did what she could, which was a lot, and never asked for anything she did not need. I kept paying for a while. I kept being the bridge even as I was building my own island. Then one afternoon, after a quarterly review went well, and I walked back to my desk with a coffee I did not need, I realized I wanted certainty more than I wanted harmony. Harmony was me doing quiet math to make other people's chaos look like providence. Certainty was a test. That is the pivot. You can hear it right. The mind slows, the body steadies. No speeches, no threats. Just a question I needed answered without spin. If they thought I had nothing, would they help? If they thought I had fallen, would they reach? I did not want to guess. I wanted to see it in daylight. So I designed a stress test. It was simple on purpose. No theatrics. I would tell my family I had lost my job. I would say my card might be shut off. I would ask if anyone could spare $1,000 for rent. Not a lifetime. Not a miracle. Just a bridge. The ask was small enough to be possible and big enough to be revealing. I practiced the sentence out loud so I would not telegraph the experiment. I wrote it down so I would not back out. I put the Ring notifications on so I could capture whatever came next without rewriting the memory later. In a minute, I will tell you exactly how each person responded. Spoiler, the pattern held, and it told me everything. But before we do the play-by-play, remember the point of part 2. I am not the hero for paying. I am not the villain for stopping. I am a person who learned that boundaries are not a betrayal. They are a map. And once you have a map, you can leave the maze. Now we move into discovery. The experiment, the messages, the offer that changed the temperature of the room. Stay with me. What they did not know was that the minute they answered my small question, they also answered a bigger one. I had been too loyal to ask. We ended with a plan, a simple stress test. Say I lost my job. Say my card might be shut off. Ask for $1,000 to bridge rent. Small enough to be possible, big enough to be revealing. I sent the text on a Wednesday night. Then I put my phone face down and took a walk around the block so I would not read it like a lawyer looking for loopholes. First reply my parents, "We will pray, honey. You are strong. God will open a door. No money. No offer of a couch, a blessing, and a boundary I did not ask for." Second reply, Brandon. "Sister, I can help you build character. I have after-hours cleaning at the showroom. $12 an hour. Late nights, if you want to learn hustle." The words teach and humility showed up in the same bubble. I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Third reply, Kyle. "In the middle of a trade. Let me move some things and I will circle back." He did not. Hours later, the elevator in my building clanked, and the Ring camera on my door caught exactly what I needed to remember. Callie hair and a messy bun glancing both ways down the hall like a teenager past curfew. She set a tote bag by my door. Inside a blanket, a Metro card, and $120 in cash. She did not knock. She whispered, "You are not alone," into the air, and walked away. Breadcrumb 1. Proof that love can be quiet and still be real. The next morning, I told everyone thank you. I said I would figure it out. I watched what happened when the ask passed. The family group chat lit up with talk of brunch and Brandon's latest reel. Then a new message from Brandon landed with a tone I knew by heart. He wrote, "Samantha needs to learn humility. If we spoon-feed her, she will never grow up." Kyle replied with a flex emoji. My parents dropped a heart. Breadcrumb 2. I screenshotted the exchange into my private Slack channel called Receipts and added a note in my Sunlight folder. Date, time, context. Not because I planned to sue anyone, because I wanted to stop rewriting history in my head to make it less painful. Within a week, Brandon asked for a meeting. He sent a slick PDF titled Growth Round. Evaluation on the cover in big friendly type. He wanted $1.6 million for 5% of his luxury remodel empire with a promise that I could sit in on strategy and learn from a real operator. That phrase again. Learn from a real operator. My jaw did a slow, controlled lock. Breadcrumb 3. I forwarded the deck to Evan, a friend from operations who has never once lied to me to make me feel better. He called me back in 10 minutes and said, "I am not a forensic accountant, but these gross margins do not exist in this universe." He pointed to a slide with revenue lines that leapt like a miracle and cost lines that barely moved. His voice stayed calm. He said, "If this were my money, I would not invest $1 without seeing books, contracts, and bank statements." Then he paused and added, "I know you, Sam. You do not need this man to mentor you." The same afternoon, my phone pinged with a bank alert from my parents' joint account. I'd helped them set up two-factor authentication months earlier, and I still received device notices. The alert showed a new Zelle request pending. From Brandon. Memo, reimburse me for fuel. Recipient, our mother. Breadcrumb 4. When I visited that weekend, my mother asked me to fix an issue on her phone. While I held it, a notification popped up. Another request from Brandon, this time to my father. Memo, line sister owes me. I did not snoop. I did not dig. I simply watched a pattern confirm itself on the lock screen of the woman who raised me. On Sunday, I stopped by my parents' house with coffee and a new smoke detector. While I replaced the old one, they put Brandon on speaker to talk about the family barbecue. He did not know I was there. He said, "Keep Samantha hungry. She will come around. Give her a $12 shift and a pep talk. That is how you build grit." My mother made a soft, approving sound. My father said, "We are praying." I stood on the step stool, staring at the ceiling plate, feeling the screws in my fingers turn into facts. Breadcrumb 5? Overheard words? No theory? No guesswork? Just the sentences people say when they think you cannot hear them. I drove back to Queens in a silence that was not empty. It was precise. Looking back now, that was the moment suspicion turned into certainty. The test had worked. The answers were clear. Help for me was a lesson. Help for Brandon was destiny. 2 days later, another breadcrumb walked in on its own. A subcontractor named Manny, who had done work for Brandon before, showed up at my shop in Long Island City, where we were restoring a classic car and turning it electric. He was dropping off a part for a friend of a friend and recognized my last name. He asked, "Are you related to Brandon Park?" I nodded. He exhaled. Then he said the thing that moved this from family drama to business reality. He said, "I have been waiting 3 months for a payment. He is good at talking. Not great at paying." He held up a stack of invoices folded and refolded into a hard rectangle. Breadcrumb 6. Independent confirmation from someone with skin in the game. I called Evan again. He said, "Go slow, go clean, and do not confront him with feelings. Do it with facts." He introduced me to a forensic accountant who specializes in small contractor roll-ups and rescue buys. I scheduled a consult not because I had decided to buy anything, but because I wanted an adult to look at the numbers without the family soundtrack playing in the background. Meanwhile, Brandon kept selling me the dream. He texted, "This is your chance to sit at the table with me." He called me sister and boss in the same sentence, which is how people butter you up when they plan to cut you down later. He sent me reels of his office, his car, his cruise. He said the best deals are done fast. Then came the document that cleared the fog. Not public, not flashy, just a quiet email from a client who had stopped answering Brandon's calls. Evan had suggested I reach out professionally as a possible future partner looking to understand service gaps in the market. The client replied with 3 bullet points and an attachment. The bullet points were boring, which is how you know they are true. Missed deadlines, moved goalposts, mismatched invoices. The attachment was a change order history with time-stamped emails. The dates told a story I could not unsee. Internal delays had been shifted onto vendors in the paperwork to avoid penalties. Breadcrumb 7, not gossip. Headers and timestamps. I did not confront Brandon. Not yet. I booked a steakhouse in Manhattan for the following week because New York is a one-party consent state. I called my attorney and asked one question. Can I record my own conversation in New York? She said yes, and then reminded me to say nothing on that recording I would not want in court. I said understood, and wrote down a list of questions that were only about numbers. No feelings, no family, line items, margins, liens, payroll timing, vehicle leases. A calm checklist is a weapon when a tantrum would feel better and achieve nothing. Before that dinner, one more breadcrumb fell into my lap. Kyle texted me a screenshot by accident meant for Brandon. It was a meme about me being the big city sister who thinks she is better than the family. Under it, Brandon had typed, "She will cave. She always does." Kyle wrote back, "She is soft." My stomach did a slow roll and then went still. I did not reply. I saved the image to sunlight and reminded myself of the point of evidence. It does not exist to win arguments. It exists to end them. Let me pull the threads tight before we turn the page. The stress test proved behavior, not just beliefs. The group chat showed contempt dressed as coaching. The Zelle requests revealed a pipeline of small withdrawals from my parents to Brandon that were being framed as favors or repayments tied to me. The subcontractor put a face to the unpaid invoices. The client's attachment confirmed timeline edits. Kyle's misfire showed me how I was being discussed when I was not in the room. And Brandon's deck asking for $1.6 million for 5% with margins from a fantasy world gave me the hard number I needed to stop pretending this was about mentorship. That is discovery. Not dramatic, not cinematic, just one careful breadcrumb every few days until the path writes itself. I did not rage. I made a reservation. I printed my checklist. I tested the mic under my blouse and took a deep breath that tasted like peppercorn and preparation. Next, we move from finding to knowing. The steakhouse, the questions. The cool sky over Long Island when facts finally replaced captions. 3 layers of revelation are coming: what happened, who helped it happen, and how long the plan had been running without my consent. Stay with me. What they did not know was that the door they were pushing me through led to a table where every answer would be recorded legal and impossible to spin. I walked into the steakhouse with a checklist, not a speech. Dark wood, low lamps, pepper in the air. I had already confirmed the law. New York is one-party consent. My attorney's reminder looped in my head, say nothing you would not want read back to a judge. I clicked the recorder on under my blouse and let the room fade, until all I could hear was my own breathing and the clink of cutlery. Brandon arrived like a headline. Big smile, bigger hug, sunglasses pushed into his hair, though it was evening. He called me small fry the way people do when they want you to remember your place. Then he launched into the pitch. His company was exploding. The valuation was 8 figures. My chance, his words, to learn from a real operator. He repeated that phrase like a brand tagline. I did not argue valuation. I asked about facts. How are you handling liens? What is payroll timing to the day? Show me lease terms on the car. Do you have UCC filings against assets? Who signs change orders? What does your cash conversion cycle look like? He held eye contact and talked in circles. He said liens were a hater's term. Payroll was fluid when you are scaling. The car was a marketing asset. UCC filings were paperwork the bank likes. Change orders were a moving target. Cash conversion was industry standard. I let the silences lengthen until the waiter looked uneasy and Brandon filled them with more adjectives. Then a hairline crack. He admitted he had pushed a vendor just a little to own the delay so a client penalty would not trigger. He half laughed, like it was clever. He said payroll had been tight a couple of times, but he had covered it with personal funds. He meant my funds, though he did not say it out loud. He called the car a lease hack and said it paid for itself because clients expected a certain look. He ordered the tomahawk and asked to keep the bone for his dog. The recorder hummed steadier than my pulse. I paid the check. He let me. He shook my hand and said he was proud of me for staying humble. I stepped onto the sidewalk and felt the air hit my face like a rinse. Taxis hissed past on wet blacktop. Somewhere a bus braked long and low. I looked up. The sky between buildings was a deep ink blue, ordinary, almost bored. That detail matters. When your life tilts, the world does not. It keeps breathing. You just finally hear it. Surface betrayal revealed itself right there at the curb. It was not one act. It was the posture. The deck asking for $1.6 million for 5% backed by air. The contempt in the group chat repackaged as mentorship over stake. The way help for me was a lesson, and help for him was destiny. I had been asked to pay for a show and call it family. The deeper conspiracy unspooled over the next 48 hours with receipts not rage. The forensic accountant I hired pulled public records and bank data through legal channels. 3 appraisers, independent, boring, perfect, valued the business at $340,000 total. A UCC search lit up a line of credit and my parents' names tied to Brandon's company signed months earlier without a word to me. My mother and father were in deeper than they could afford, and the private Zelle trickle I had seen on their phones now looked like a drip line keeping Brandon's brand alive. Invoices showed payroll sliding past due dates more than once. Vendor balances were rolled forward like a bad rug. The McLaren lease sat under a corporate shell not in his name. On paper, the swagger had a keystone me. Then the pattern clicked into place not as a feeling, but as math. I had been sending roughly $18,000 a month, about a third of my net, to a system that treated my competence as communal property and my boundaries as betrayal. Brandon extracted spotlight and subsidies. My parents extracted peace at any cost. Kyle extracted belief in potential. Callie gave what she had and asked for nothing she did not need. Every breadcrumb now pointed to one conclusion: I was the engine. Engines do not get thanked. Engines get used until they stop. The moment of truth needed a location, something I could see and touch to anchor all of this. I drove to Long Island and walked through Brandon's office. The photos from his feed hung in frames, glossy counters, staged smiles, captions about generational wealth. The glass was cool under my fingertips. Outside, gravel crunched under my flats as I crossed to the lot to look at the car. The McLaren was not a myth. It sat there sleek and unsympathetic. Sun hit the windshield and bounced hard. I remember thinking again, the sky is still blue. Ordinary, unimpressed. That was the point. Facts do not care about captions. Back at my place in Queens, I laid the breadcrumbs out like a map on my kitchen table. The stress test texts. The ring clip of Callie's midnight tote with $120 and a blanket. The group chat line where Brandon wrote, "I needed to learn humility." The accidental meme from Kyle calling me the big city sister who thinks she is better. The Zelle requests to my parents with memo lines that said, "Reimburse me for fuel and sister owes me." Manny's folded invoices and his careful voice. The client's change order history with timestamps that did not lie. The steakhouse audio where Brandon used the words lease hack and admitted payroll had been tight. The UCC filing with my parents' signatures. The 3 appraisals all landing near $340,000. When you put them together, the picture was not dramatic. It was simple. He was underwater. They were enabling. I was the plan. I do not do impulsive. I do decisive. The decision was this: I would end the plan by writing a new one. If Brandon wanted me in the business, then I would be in it on terms that protected the people who actually worked and paid, not the people who posed and posted. I would make an all-cash offer at the real number. I would require clean books, keys, and control. I would set the title on the car straight to the leaseholder and remove it from his reach. I would bring in systems, not speeches. And if he wanted a role, he would have one with responsibilities, a clear salary, and no card that could turn vibes into debt. Before I slept, I called my attorney. I said, I am going to make an offer to buy 100% at $340,000 contingent on a standard diligence list. I want employment terms drafted for a project manager role at $85,000 base, no corporate credit, no special privileges. She asked if I was ready for the fallout. I said I was ready for the quiet. Awakening is not fireworks. It is a ledger finally balancing. It is a body that stops apologizing. It is a woman who walks into her own kitchen, turns off every notification, and writes a list that starts with the word execute. Next, we move from knowing to acting. The calls, the contracts, the locks and passwords, the repo that made a hole where a highlight reel used to be. No shouting, no just gravity doing what gravity does. What they did not know was that the moment I chose facts over feelings, the ending wrote itself. Awakening only matters if you act. I acted quietly. First, the offer. All cash $340,000 for 100% of Brandon's company contingent on a clean diligence list. Employment for Brandon. As a project manager at $85,000 base, no corporate card, no special privileges. Performance goals in writing. My attorney drafted the documents. He signed. I wired. We closed. Day 1, control the basics. Locks changed. Passwords rotated. Admin rights moved. Vendor list verified. Payroll run on time. Subcontractors paid and the order work was completed, not the order people yelled. The McLaren leased through a corporate shell was documented. We served notice of default and scheduled repossession. No drama. A toe, a clipboard, a signature. Gravel under the lift and a sky that did not care. Day 2, capture evidence. Priya from IT now on. My team ran an email header audit on disputed schedules. Timestamps showed internal delays masked as vendor errors. I preserved everything. PDFs. Call summaries. Calendar invites. The steakhouse audio recorded in New York under one-party consent. Every file went into a folder labeled Sunlight with a simple naming convention so nothing could be lost or twisted. Day 3, set structure. I moved Callie into operations with training and a 12-month path to chief operating officer. We implemented Notion for documentation and Monday for project tracking. Weekly stand-ups, clear owners, written decisions. Dave and Manny, reliable tradesmen who had weathered the chaos, got benefits and predictable schedules. Within 1 quarter, our net promoter score rose by 18 points because predictability beats charisma. Day 4, remove temptation. Corporate Amex turned off. Expense approvals centralized. Vehicle policy standardized. Brandon shifted to a hot desk like everyone else. His title changed to what he could actually do: manage projects. He could earn more by hitting milestones. He could not buy status with debt. Day 5, protect the perimeter. My lawyer filed fraud alerts with the credit bureaus for 90 days on every line that had ever brushed my name. We removed me as co-signer anywhere I had been added without explicit consent. A line of credit that tied my parents to Brandon's business was closed. Penalties paid, damage contained. We sent a cease and desist through counsel when my parents texted about undoing what you did to your brother. Boundaries are actions, not speeches. Then I set the stage for Sunlight. My parents planned their 40th anniversary party. 30 or more relatives, a perfect room for clarity. I built a short slide deck. No commentary, just receipts. The ring snapshot of Callie leaving $120 and a blanket at my door. The family chat, where Brandon wrote that I needed to learn humility. The email header audit with dates that did not lie. The repossession notice with identifying numbers redacted. Zelle requests labeled reimburse me for fuel and sister owes me. 5 slides, 10 minutes, a boundary with witnesses. I did not chase a scene, I prepared for one and then let truth do its job. The consequences arrived like gravity. In the office, Brandon struggled with accountability. A client confronted him about a shifted timeline. We showed the header audit. He went on a performance improvement plan. He signed it in front of HR. A week later, he tried a power move. He walked in and said, I want my old role, my old pay, and my card back. I said no. You can stay as a project manager under the plan, or you can resign. He chose to resign. Online, he posted about leaving to pursue a stealth venture. The comments clapped. Then vendors replied with small claims filings and timestamps. A subcontractor linked a resolved payment after our team made it right. The narrative corrected itself without me typing a single word. At home, my parents asked for a family meeting. I declined. Through counsel, we formalized no contact. I kept one sentence on my phone in case I wavered. You left me alone when I needed help. I am leaving you alone now. Financial reality replaced the brand. Tax notices reached Brandon that were not mine to solve. Civil suits landed that were not mine to absorb. He sold a watch, then a second car. He took a union labor job. There is dignity in all work. The humiliation was not the job. It was the fall from a persona built on borrowed shine. The anniversary night did what it needed to do. My mother gave a sweet speech about unity. My father said we do not shame family in public. I connected the laptop and clicked through 5 slides. No voice raised, no insult. When the last image faded, I closed the lid and said, this is why the engine is stepping out of the machine. The room was very quiet. Then someone clapped. It was Manny standing in the back near the coffee. Sunlight has a sound. It is not loud. It is final. Time moved. By month 18, the EV Resto Mod studio in Long Island City ran on systems not adrenaline. We paid people on time. We finished what we promised. Callie sat in the second office with a plant that refused to die and a calendar of color-coded sprints. She earned the title of Chief Operating Officer and 10% through an employee stock plan. Her daughter Ella got into a STEM charter she loves. A donor trust purchased a townhouse in Brookline for them $1.2 million quietly. The donor was me. I told her a year later. She cried and then she laughed. And then she asked for the paint color list because being safe made her practical. As for me, I stopped auditioning for love. I invest in character and I fire for patterns. I still help, but now the help is anonymous and the budget has a line called peace. The biggest shift is not that I punished anyone. It is that I stepped out of roles I never agreed to play. If you are standing where I stood, here is the map. Sacrifice, betrayal, awakening, revenge, justice, peace. Not movie chapters, just days of the week stacked in the right order. Document everything, speak calmly, act legally, let gravity work. Have you ever had to choose between the family you were born into and the family you are building? Tell me your city and your moment. I read the comments. If you want more stories, where receipts beat rumors and preparation beats performance, subscribe. Around here, we do not confuse silence with consent. We prepare, we act, and we let the sky absolutely indifferently blue remind us that the world keeps going when you finally make a different choice. Story 2. By the end of 30 days, 3 adults and 2 children were out of my brownstone. The luxury SUV was on a flatbed under a voluntary surrender order from the lender, and my front steps were finally quiet. I am Samantha Hale, 32, finance director in New York City. I speak in budgets and risks for a living, which is a polite way to say I am paid to see what is coming before it arrives. I thought I understood betrayal. I thought I was too organized and too careful to ever be blindsided inside my own home. What they did not know was simple. I keep receipts, not just the paper kind. Digital trails, deeds, certified letters, comparable listings. If you have ever been the responsible one in your family, the person who keeps the lights on and the peace held together, tell me where you are watching from. I want to see how far responsibility travels. Here's the quick snapshot so you know who is talking to you. I live in a Brooklyn brownstone my grandparents left to me. They taught me compound interest with a jar of pennies and then trusted me with the deed. I put myself through school. I took the analyst job nobody wanted. I lived in spreadsheets and earned my way into a director seat. Total compensation lands in the high 6 figures because I solve hard problems and I do it quietly. The house is mine by law and by stewardship. That detail matters. Family, though, is not a spreadsheet. My father is charismatic when life is easy and hard to find when it is not. After his last breakup, he moved into the garden unit just for a few months. A few months became a year, and a year became years. I kept the utilities in my name because late fees make me itch. I told myself I was buying peace. The truth is, I was letting my yes do work my boundaries should have done. Then my father's girlfriend arrived in the story. Jenna, 31. A wellness influencer and preschool aide with 2 kids who are innocent and deserve a world kinder than the adults around them. She started as a weekend guest and softened into a regular presence. Groceries stretched, schedules shifted. The tone changed from thank you to, of course. I kept reminding myself to be generous. I also kept notes. Let me plant 3 breadcrumbs now because the payoff later will be clean. First breadcrumb. The family group chat felt normal until it did not. The messages moved from schedules to comments about my kitchen not being clean enough, suggestions about where a nursery would look best, and a casual reference to my office as if it already belonged to someone else. I screenshotted the thread and filed it. Second breadcrumb. The Ring doorbell does more than catch packages. It quietly logs who comes and goes. I had given my father a code. One afternoon, the camera caught Jenna letting herself in while I was at work, waving at the lens like it was part of her routine, and tucking a stack of my mail into a tote labeled declutter. I did not overreact. I did record the clip. Third breadcrumb. Market rent in my neighborhood is a number with teeth. Comparable listings on my block put a similar garden unit somewhere between $8,000 and $12,000 a month. I saved 3 of those listings as PDFs because the finance director in me always prepares the baseline before a negotiation. That number will matter when we talk about value-back rent and what it costs to live where you live. Two quick character notes so you can track the people. Evan is my validator. He is the friend who tells me the truth without a speech. Callie is my anchor. She is the one who reminds me to eat when the plan is eating me. You will meet both of them soon. For now, know this, I am not the shouting type. I am the calm type who writes things down and lets the record do the talking. One more thing for clarity, because I promised you a clean, logical story. I never cut essential utilities while anyone was still living in my house. Not once. That matters legally and morally. When consequences arrive later, they come by the book. So, that is the setup. I am 32, a finance director in New York, the deed holder to a Brooklyn brownstone, and the responsible child who has been saying yes for too long. The group chat has turned. The doorbell camera is paying attention. The market rent number is loaded and waiting. And a brunch is coming where someone will make an announcement they think I cannot counter. That is where the sacrifice pattern turns into a ledger I can no longer ignore. Now let me show you how years of quiet yes set the stage for the loudest no of my life. Looking back now, I can track the slope of my yeses like a line on a chart. Year 1 in the director's seat, I covered the property taxes on the brownstone because the estate had just settled, and I wanted a clean ledger. My grandparents' house was my responsibility in every sense, and responsibility is a muscle I had been flexing since I was a kid. My father thanked me, promised to square up when things settled, and I believed him because that is what daughters do when love and duty blur. Year 2, after another relationship of his unraveled, he moved into the garden unit for a few months. A few months softened into a full year. Then that year drifted into 3. I kept the utilities in my name because late fees bother me the way a pebble in your shoe does. I told myself I was buying peace. What I was really doing was subsidizing avoidance. It did not feel like sacrifice in the moment. It felt like being the adult in the room. We always had roles. I was the responsible one, the scheduler, the person who brought extra batteries and a backup plan. In our family, the golden child was not a sibling. It was whoever occupied my father's focus that season. When life was easy, he was generous and magnetic. When life got heavy, he got light on his feet. I learned to fill the gaps without comment. That is how the responsible one stays responsible. The brownstone mattered to my grandparents. It was never just a house, it was proof that careful choices compound. When they left it to me, they left instructions I took seriously. Keep it intact. Keep it solvent. Keep it a place where people arrive and exhale. I hosted holidays. I painted trim at midnight before big dinners. I fixed leaky faucets with YouTube and determination. I liked being the anchor because anchors do not get swept away. Looking back now, I can see how money leaks disguise themselves as kindness. Groceries for the whole house just this week. The plumber because you know who to call, the water heater since you handled the card. None of it felt like a big ask in isolation. Together they were a steady siphon. I logged it all because that is how my brain works. I did not confront it then because I thought harmony needed quiet. Harmony needs truth. There was the car. The Range Rover with the smooth ride and the prettier interest rate if it sat under my name. I agreed to co-sign and title it to me because I believed the refinance promise. We told ourselves it was temporary. Temporary is a gentle word that can hide a lot of permanence. Payments got bumpy, messages got vague. I picked up a few months here and there because insurance notices make me break out in a cold sweat. I told myself I was preventing a crisis. In reality, I was underwriting someone else's comfort. Looking back now, I can point to the little phrases that eroded the edges of my boundaries. You are so good at this. You are better with money. You will make it back. They sound like compliments. They function like keys. Each one opens a new door into your time, your wallet, your space. I am not a victim in this. I am a participant who did not read the fine print of my own generosity. Then came Jenna. She did not announce herself as a problem. She arrived with charm and a tote bag that said good vibes only. She played the part of helpful guest so convincingly that even I mistook encroachment for care. She rearranged the kitchen to suit her clean system. She swapped out my cleaners for a subscription kit that cost 3 times as much and left everything smelling like eucalyptus and lecture. She complimented the house often the way someone does when they are measuring it in their mind. I am not blaming her for being who she is. I am holding my father accountable for what he allowed and what I tolerated. That is a harder sentence to say. It is also the right one. Entitlement rarely arrives alone. It thrives where boundaries are fuzzy and gratitude is a performance. Looking back now, I can tell you the exact moment I started documenting with intention. It was the ring clip of Jenna letting herself in while I was at work and tucking my mail into her tote, waving at the camera like it was a neighbor. I did not explode. I exported the clip, labeled it with the date and time, and dropped it into a folder that already held utility bills, maintenance invoices, and photos of the condition of every room. Documentation is not drama, it is dignity. The family group chat began to read like a forecast. At first it was schedules and dinner plans, then the tone shifted. Comments about my kitchen not being clean enough. Jokes about my office turning into a nursery because it had the best light. A suggestion that I would be happier in a midtown studio because the commute would be shorter. I took screenshots. Not to weaponize, to remember the sequence without arguing about memory later. Here is the part people skip when they tell revenge stories. The backstory is not there to justify the ending. It is there to explain how a pattern trains a person to ignore themselves. For 3 years, my father lived in a garden unit in a neighborhood where comparable listings for similar units sat between $8,000 and $12,000 a month. I let him stay without a lease because I thought love and law could hold hands if we were careful. I paid for most of the shared utilities because turning off the lights on family felt cruel. I covered repairs because broken things make my skin itch. None of that was illegal. Much of it was unwise. All of it set the stage. Looking back now, I recognize that I had all the skills to protect myself and simply chose not to use them at home. At work, I am the person who insists on comparables before approving a number. At home, I leaned on vibes. At work, I require clean documentation before a deal moves. At home, I trusted promises with no due dates. I am saying this out loud because someone needs to hear that competence in one arena does not automatically transfer to another. You have to invite it in. I did start inviting it in. Quietly at first. I pulled 3 market comps for the garden unit and saved them. I made a simple spreadsheet with columns for date expense, who benefited, and whether there was any repayment. I exported my Venmo and Zelle history into a CSV and highlighted every transfer that could be tied to household costs. I moved the deed and probate documents into a folder called House Tenancy and shared it to a private email that exists for moments like these. None of this meant I had decided to act. It meant I was done pretending I would not need to. And because stories are not just numbers, here is the emotional ledger too. The more I gave, the more invisible I felt. Gratitude turned into expectation. Requests turned into instructions. The phrase "we need your office for the nursery" did not drop out of a clear blue sky at that brunch. It grew out of 1,000 little acquiescences I had made because it felt easier to bend than to explain why I would not. Looking back now, I can see the child version of me that got rewarded for being low maintenance and high performing. She built a life where she could be counted on. She also built a trap where being counted on meant being counted out of decisions about her own space. That realization did not make me bitter. It made me precise. So when the brunch invitation arrived, when the tone of the group chat got bright and a little performative, I knew something staged was coming. I did not know the exact lines. I did know my role was about to be rewritten. I packed a smile on my phone and the calm that comes from knowing your paperwork is in order. I texted Evan to be on standby because validators keep you honest. I told Callie to ping me an eat reminder because anchors keep you human. That is the sacrifice pattern. Years of useful yeses. A house held together with care. A father I love who loves convenience. A girlfriend who mistook access for ownership. A responsible woman who finally decided that boundaries are not mean. They are math. With that ledger clear, we can step into the moment when suspicion hardened into certainty and the brunch turned into a courtroom with pastries. The brunch felt like a performance before I even walked in. String lights at noon. Eucalyptus everywhere. The cousins clustered for photos like we were at a soft launch for a new product. I smiled, said hello, and clocked the details my brain always clocks. 2 toddler chairs pulled up to the table. A stack of paint swatches on the windowsill in a very particular shade of sage. A camera tripod pointed toward the spot with the best light. People do not set a stage like that without a script. Breadcrumb 1 lands the second I take off my coat. Evan texts me a screenshot. It is Jenna's Instagram story from earlier that morning. A boomerang of a paint roller with the caption, "Nursery Prep Day manifesting the best light." The background looks suspiciously like my office wall. I do not react. I put my phone away. Calm is leverage. I move toward the kitchen to help plate fruit. Breadcrumb 2 appears when I open the drawer where I keep the good knives. They are gone. In their place is a labeled tray that says "Dulling Risk." I hear Jenna behind me explaining to a relative that my knives are not safe around kids and that she fixed it. I have lived in this house for years without a single cut. I do not debate it now. I am gathering, not arguing. I set plates, I pour coffee. Breadcrumb 3 walks in on 2 small feet and a marker-stained sweatshirt. One of Jenna's kids holds up my framed bonus letter as if it is a coloring book. Look, shiny paper. I smile, take it gently, and set it face down on a high shelf. The kid is innocent. The adults are not. I note how comfortable everyone is being in spaces that are not theirs. Then I hear it. Breadcrumb 4 comes as an overheard sentence in the hallway while I am swapping the coffee filter. My father's voice, layered. She will not make a scene, he says. She never does. Jenna answers light and confident. She is conflict-averse. We will present it as a plan, not a question. They are not whispering. They are assuming my role in their story is to accommodate. That is not a plan. That is entitlement. The doorbell rings. The cousins who could not make it in person beam in on a tablet propped up by the fruit platter. Jenna taps her glass with a spoon, and the room hushes. She announces the pregnancy. I clap. I mean it. Children are not the problem here. Manipulation is. She thanks everyone for coming to help us transition the house for the baby. Then she says the part she rehearsed. The most logical room for the nursery is Sam's office. It has the best light. We have already found a great midtown studio for her with a friend rate. The lease starts in 2 weeks. We put a refundable hold to lock it in. That last line is the tell. Refundable hold. They did not pay for my new life. They reserved control over my current one. She hands me a bright folder with a printed lease inside. On top of the lease is a typed list titled Move Timeline. It includes Pack Sam's office crib delivery paint day and deep clean. There are dates. There are assigned helpers. There is no place where I say yes. Here is where the discovery becomes a document. I open the folder. The lease has my name printed under prospective tenant and a space for my signature. The broker's card is paper clipped to the back with a handwritten note, family discount. I flip to the numbers. $4,800 a month. Utilities not included. A deposit equal to 2 months' rent. It is not a studio anyone who knows me would choose. It is a studio chosen because it solves their problem. I look up. The room is full of people who love the idea of family harmony. They are not bad people, they just prefer a tidy story to a true one. I could make a speech right here. Instead, I do something more efficient. I set the folder on the coffee table and ask a simple question. Who signed the hold paperwork? Jenna says I did, but it is refundable like she is offering me a gift. My father adds, we confront the first month as if money is the pivot point rather than ownership. Breadcrumb 5 is a sound more than a sentence. The Ring camera in the hallway pings my phone because someone is at the door with a delivery. I glance down. The screenshot shows a box labeled Convertible Crib. Shipping address, my brownstone, recipient Jenna. I let the lock screen go dark. I will not let a notification run my face. Now that the plan is on the table, I start asking questions you only ask when you have already done your homework. When is paint day, I say. Next Saturday, Jenna says the sage we picked looks so good in the light. And who is handling the utilities at the studio, I add, leafing through the lease as if I am considering it. The building will help you set it up, she chirps. It is actually easier than what you have here. She smiles like she is giving me an upgrade. It is wild what people can say with a straight face when they believe they have momentum. Here is the part where financial exploitation goes from vibe to math. I ask my father, how long have you been in the garden unit now? He says, a few years like we are at a reunion. I nod. About 3, I say. He does not correct me. And Jenna, how many months have you been staying full-time? She glances at the cousins and says, 8, 9. I say, let us go with 8 for now. I do not raise my voice. I open my phone and, as politely as I can, lay out what those few years and 8 months translate to in the actual market. Comparable listings for the garden unit on this block run between $8,000 and $12,000 a month, I say. I have 3 comps saved, taking the high end because this unit is renovated. 3 years of occupancy at $12,000 a month equals $432,000 in value. 8 months at the same rate equals $96,000. Shared utilities on top of that are another few thousand a year. We can get exact later. The point is, space costs what it costs in this neighborhood. You could feel the air change. It is not anger. It is math landing in a room that had been running on feelings. A cousin clears his throat. Someone laughs too loudly. Jenna waves a hand and calls the numbers hypotheticals, which is a word people use when they do not want to look at receipts. My father looks at the floor the way he did when I was little and asked if he was really coming to the recital. He is a man who avoids hard things until they are unavoidable. Today is unavoidable. Breadcrumb 6 comes from a place I did not expect. My aunt looks at the lease in my hands and says, "Honey, did you agree to this?" It is the first time anyone has framed it as a question instead of a decree. I answer the way you answer when you are done auditioning for the role of agreeable daughter. No, I did not agree, and I am not moving out. I do not raise my voice. I do not perform. I do something more destabilizing. I mirror the projection that has been happening to me. You are proposing a move timeline, I say to Jenna, without the consent of the person who owns the property. You are describing my office as a nursery. You are calling a lease you chose for me a family solution. None of that is collaboration. It is unilateral. And unilateral ends here. If you felt your shoulders drop hearing that, that is because truth makes gravity behave differently. People stop floating in delusion and come back to the floor. The brunch switches from celebration to negotiation without anyone announcing the change. Someone asks, "Can we talk about this later?" Just the three of us, which is a classic tactic to move a boundary conversation off stage. I smile. "We can," I say, "and we will after dessert." I am not stalling. I am sequencing. I want everyone to finish their food with the new reality in the room. As plates get cleared, Jenna tries a softer angle. "We thought the studio would be easier on you," she says, "less house to manage." I nod because I understand how this will sound on her channel. Empathic villainy plays well. Easier on me, I repeat, would be honoring the deed, the law, and the work I have done to keep this home intact. I do not mention the spreadsheets yet. I do not mention the certified mail that will go out tomorrow if they keep pressing. I save those for when process, not persuasion, is the point. 2 more breadcrumbs close out the discovery phase. First, Evan, my validator, sends me a text that is just 2 words, paper ready. He has already pulled the deed and the probate letter from the shared drive and organized them for screen sharing if I need them. Second, I open my calendar and see an invitation arrive from a shared account I do not recognize. Title: Paint Nursery. Location: my address. It is a sloppy mistake. It also tells me what I needed to know. This was never a conversation. It was a rollout. I stand. I thank everyone for coming. I congratulate Jenna again on her pregnancy because a child does not deserve to carry the weight of adult choices. Then I set the folder with the lease on the coffee table and say one sentence that changes the room. We will not be converting my office into a nursery. I will not be moving into a studio. And starting today, decisions about this house will be made by the owner of this house. There is a beat of silence, then the talking starts. Suggestions, please, a few accusations in soft voices. I let them pass like weather. Discovery is over. Certainty is here. The next part is not about how loud anyone can speak. It is about how clearly I can act. And if you are wondering when I play the deed on the television when the room goes from brunch to courtroom, that is next. But first, I needed them to show me their plan in their own words. They did. Now I can show them mine. I did not raise my voice. I raised the evidence. Before we keep debating a plan I did not agree to, I said, let us ground this in facts. I picked up the remote-tapped screen mirror on my phone, and the television over the mantel woke with a soft blue glow. The cousins on the tablet fell quiet. Forks paused midair. Layer 1, the surface betrayal, the deed filled the screen, black ink on white. My name spelled out in full with the words, fee, simple, absolute right, where the notary stamped them. I zoomed in on the signature page and the probate confirmation email from my attorney. No emotion, just ownership. This house belongs to me, I said steady. That is not up for discussion. The room shifted. People who had been smiling in the direction of harmony were suddenly looking at lines and seals. I flipped to the folder labeled House Tenancy. Up came clear photos of my office taken the week before, time-stamped. The same angle as Jenna's story that morning. Same window, same light, different reality, my desk, my work, my framed letter back in its place. You are free to imagine a nursery anywhere, I added, but you do not get to declare one in a room that is not yours. Layer 2, the deeper conspiracy. I did not use the word conspiracy to be dramatic. I used it because plans built in private are not accidents. I opened the calendar screenshot that had hit my phone during brunch. Paint Nursery. Location, my address. Then the family group chat screen grabs soft, polite messages that read, less like conversation and more like rollout. My office referred to in the past tense like it was already reassigned. The Instagram story boomerang of a paint roller with the caption, manifesting the best light. The ring clip thumbnail where Jenna waved at the camera while letting herself in and slipped my mail into her tote labeled declutter. I did not play the clip. I did not need to. The still image and timestamp were enough to make the point without turning brunch into a courtroom. I could feel the urge in my chest to add commentary. I did not. I let silence do the heavy lifting. It is amazing how loud the truth gets when you stop competing with it. Layer 3 pattern recognition. This one I did not put on the screen. I put it in words because it was mine to own. I trained everyone here to expect my yes, I said. I covered things quietly. I stretched to make room. I let convenience override clarity. That created a pattern where I became invisible in my own house. That pattern ends today. There was a moment, small, almost ordinary, that became an anchor. A dust mote caught the light and spun. The radiator ticked in that patient way cast iron radiators do when steam makes its way through old bones. Outside the window, the sky was a plain, bright blue. Nothing epic, just steady. I felt my heartbeat match the radiator's rhythm. I could breathe again. My aunt was the first to speak. "So what happens now?" she asked, voice gentle, eyes clear. She was not asking me to negotiate. She was asking about process. "Now we stop pretending this is a family discussion about my relocation," I said. "It is not. It is a legal matter about people occupying space they do not own, making unilateral plans and attempting to pressure the owner with a surprise announcement. I am not moving out. My office is not becoming a nursery. If you want to talk about what lawful occupancy looks like going forward, I am willing to have that conversation with documents, not vibes." Jenna tried to smile it back into casual. "We just thought it would be easier on you," she said. "Less house to manage." I nodded once. "What is easier on me," I answered, "is the law, which I will follow, which I will also enforce." I closed the deed. On the TV, I put up a single slide with 4 lines in a clean font because I wanted everyone, including myself, to remember the sequence. 1. The deed names me as the owner. 2. Any future occupancy decisions will be documented, not assumed. 3. Market rent on this block is a real number, not a metaphor. I have 3 comps saved between $8,000 and $12,000 a month for a similar unit. 4. Starting tomorrow, everything proceeds by the book. No surprises, no whisper campaigns, no offstage pressure. You could feel the temperature in the room settle. Not warm, not cold. Neutral. Clarity has a climate. My father finally looked at me straight on. "Sam," he said quietly, "this is a lot." He was not wrong. I kept my tone the same as it had been since I started the screen share. "It is," I said. "That is why we are going to do it the right way. No one is getting locked out. No utilities are being cut while anyone is still here. I am not doing self-help. I am following the law, and I expect everyone else to do the same." He nodded because there was nothing else to grab onto. Emotion had been stripped off the moment. Only facts remained. Someone asked if we could take this offline. We did. I closed the slides. People drifted toward the door. The tablet with the cousins on Zoom went dark. The smell of eucalyptus lingered like a closing credits song. I stood at the window for a beat and watched the dust float in the light until it stopped looking like a snow globe and started looking like air. In the kitchen, I rinsed the coffee pot because rinsing resets me. Evan texted, "You good?" I wrote back. "Yes, then tomorrow, paper first." That night, I sat at my dining table, the same one my grandparents had used for dominoes, and reviewed my folders. Deed and probate in one, utilities and maintenance in another. The spreadsheet of shared costs and transfers. The PDF comps for rent. The ring still frame. The group chat screenshots. Not to publish. To preserve. I drafted a clean timeline, 3 years of garden unit occupancy, 8 months of additional full-time occupants, notable dates, and the brunch announcement. I added a line at the end in bold, all steps to be taken after the notice period through proper filings with council. Before I went to bed, I wrote a sentence on a sticky note and put it on my phone. Calm is not passive. Calm is preparation. If you are wondering about the pregnancy discrimination angle some people reach for in these situations, yes, I had already thought about it. Housing law is not employment law. I was not removing anyone mid-lease. There was no lease. I was not retaliating. I was asserting ownership and setting a lawful process with a clear timeline. I would not be discussing medical details. I would be discussing occupancy and terms. Full stop. I slept, not long enough. Morning came with the clatter of the mail slot and the kind of light that makes the brownstone banister glow. I made coffee, texted Callie that I was eating, and put my hair in a bun, because that is how I signal my brain it is time to work. Then I headed to my attorney's office with a neat stack of documents and a quiet voice. Part 5 is where the plan turns into certified mail and timestamps. This part, this awakening, is where I took my story back without a single shout, a single slammed door, or a single unsafe move. And if you are listening, wondering whether staying calm actually tilts the ground under people who confuse kindness with weakness, It does. It tilts it just enough for the truth to stand up. I met my attorney with a neat stack and a calmer voice than I felt. We reviewed ownership, occupancy, and the paper trail I had already built. Then we did the only thing that matters when emotions are hot and property is on the line. We put everything in writing. That afternoon, we served a 30-day notice to quit on both occupants, my father as a tenant at will, and Jenna as an unpermitted occupant by certified mail and by posting a copy on the garden unit door with a time-stamped photo. No threats, no scenes. A clear date, a clear expectation, and a clear sentence at the bottom. All next steps will proceed through housing court if the unit is not surrendered by the deadline. While the notice clock started, I finished my evidence kit. I exported the Venmo and Zelle logs that tied me to household costs over 3 years. I saved 3 comparable rental listings from my block showing a realistic range between $8,000 and $12,000 per month. I added a simple valuation page, 3 years at $12,000 equals $432,000. 8 months at $12,000 equals $96,000. Documented furnishing damage equals $18,000. Total demand if pursued equals $546,000. I was not bluffing. I was offering a waiver if they left on time. I clipped the ring still frame Jenna waving as she let herself in next to a screenshot of the calendar invite titled Paint Nursery that hit my phone during brunch. I did not publish any of it. This was not social warfare, it was a litigation file. Process extended beyond paper. I emailed the utility providers to schedule clean transfers when the unit was vacant. No essential service would be cut while anyone remained in place. I also called the auto lender. The Range Rover title and loan were in my name with my father as a permitted user. Payments had become inconsistent and I was done underwriting risk. I requested a voluntary surrender and coordinated pickup on a public street through the lender's standard process. Separate issue, separate timeline, fully lawful. I looped in my 2 constants. Evan, my validator, double-checked the math and the dates. Callie, my anchor, sent me calendar pings that said, eat something and breathe before you send. Power shifts when you prepare, not when you perform. 2 things happened during the notice period that mattered. First, Jenna floated the pregnancy discrimination line in texts to relatives. My attorney answered with a 2-sentence letter, "This is not employment. There is no lease. The owner is following the required notice and will file a holdover action if needed." Second, Jenna's ex-husband filed a child support action that triggered a routine genetic test. The result shared within their circle and then whispered through ours confirmed he was the biological father. I did not weaponize it. I did not need to. It simply erased the last pretense that this was a family emergency I was obligated to solve. The baby shower landed in the middle of the notice period. I had already served notice. I brought an envelope anyway. When the speeches turned to sentimental, I asked for a minute and read a single paragraph out loud. The date notice was served, the deadline, and a short version of the valuation. Then I held up a printed QR code that linked to the PDF and the certified mail receipts. Calm, public, clear. Not the first notice, just a reminder with witnesses. The days ticked by. No lockouts, no games with the thermostat, no midnight drama. On day 27, the repo truck arrived at the curb, right on the schedule the lender had given me. The driver was polite. I handed over the keys. The SUV rolled away. It was not revenge, it was risk management. On day 29, boxes began to appear by the garden unit door. On day 30, the keys landed in my palm. I took a breath that reached places I had forgotten how to fill. Because process matters, we still filed a holdover petition after the notice window closed. Housing court gave us a preliminary date a few weeks out. At the first appearance, Jenna's pregnancy discrimination talking point met the reality of property law. The judge kept the scope tight: ownership, occupancy, notice, surrender. My attorney marked the case settled contingent on the unit being vacated, which it already was. No marshal, no escalations. Just a stipulation and a court file that said exactly what happened. Fallout took care of itself. Family members who had cheered the brunch plan shifted to neutral once the deed and the documents showed up. I wrote an anonymized LinkedIn post after the move-out, a case study on boundaries property, and why kindness without clarity becomes a liability. No names, no doxing. Enough detail that other women who own property could see themselves in the scenario. A few of Jenna's brand contacts quietly stepped back. That was not my goal. It was a predictable consequence of public behavior meeting a public record. My father called to ask if he could stay on at market rent. $12,000 a month, he said, as if that sentence could rebuild trust by itself. I told him no. Not out of spite, out of self-respect. Boundaries are not punishments, they are policies. I kept one promise I made to myself in the middle of all this. I would never cut essential utilities while anyone still lived in my house. After the walkthrough, I took photos of the condition, transferred the accounts, and changed the entry codes. Then I went upstairs, poured water into a clean glass, and listened to the radiator tick like a metronome that finally matched my pace. 6 months later, the garden unit is a quiet, lawful, short-term rental for traveling nurses and visiting professors. The comps I saved turned into pricing that pays for new windows and a scholarship fund I started for first-gen students who need to learn how leases, deposits, and repair obligations really work. We meet on Saturdays in the parlor. I show them how to keep receipts and how to keep their peace. Evan still texts paper ready whenever life tilts. Callie still sends eat something at exactly the moment my calendar forgets I am a person. My chosen family is small and exact. We tell one another the truth while there is still time to act on it. The Range Rover is gone and not missed. I bought a simpler car in my own name with my own payments. It feels like sovereignty on four wheels. If you are standing where I stood, suspended between being the good child and being a good steward of your own life, learn from my sequence. Sacrifice, betrayal, awakening, preparation, lawful consequences, peace. You do not have to yell to win. You have to write things down, serve the right paper, and let the record carry the weight your throat should not. Have you ever had to choose boundaries over harmony? If you have, tell me where you are watching from so I can cheer you on. And if this helped, subscribe. I plan to keep telling the messy, honest ones with the numbers spelled out and the power turned down low enough that you can hear your own voice again. Story 3. By November of last year, a court officer pressed a ring of keys into my hand and said, "These are yours." He meant the house I had funded, the home my parents tried to take out from under me. That was the day the lock that kept me out became the proof that let me in. I am Madison Holloway, 32, a finance director in Boston. My job is turning messy numbers into clean decisions. I grew up believing that family guilt is the tax you pay for success, that being the responsible daughter means you smile, you pay, and you do not make a scene. I know better now. What they did not know is that for 26 months I had been quietly building a case. I documented every transfer, every repair, every emergency I was told was mine to solve. I tracked 40% of my total compensation, about $520,000 a year, flowing out in careful lines. By the time I was done, the support added up to roughly $450,000. Love is love, proof is proof. I kept both. If you have ever been the reliable one, the fixer, the person everyone calls when the Wi-Fi dies and the bill is due, tell me where you are watching from. I want to hear your city. I want to know your version of the story because I promise you are not alone. Here is the cast. My mother is Patricia. Everyone calls her Pat. She has a talent for cutting with compliments. My younger brother is Tyler, golden child, big smile, soft landing. I am the one with the color-coded calendar. The one who files the taxes on time. The one who says, "Send me the bill, I will handle it." Here is the world. Boston winters, South Shore summers. A family group chat named Family Dinner with 24 people in it, where casserole recipes and financial grenades live side by side. We are the kind of family that throws a baby shower in Newton with a lemon theme and a rented photo backdrop, and we are the kind of family where a single text can turn a celebration into a siege. Here is what I sacrificed. Looking back, it started as flares, a gas bill, a copay, a late fee that needed to disappear. The flares became weather. I covered property taxes when my dad forgot a deadline. I paid for a new roof after a windstorm peeled shingles like paper. I installed a thermostat and a Wi-Fi mesh so my mother could stream her shows without buffering. I added her as a supplemental user on my credit card so she would not feel embarrassed buying gifts for cousins. Every decision felt small and kind. Small and kind is how you hide a mountain. Here is how I kept score without making it a war. I created a Google Drive folder called Household Stabilizations. In it lived 26 months of bank exports, receipts from contractors, and a simple dashboard that even a sleep-deprived executive could absorb. 3 tabs, 3 colors, no drama. I am not a genius. I am disciplined. Discipline is underrated until it saves your life. And here are the 3 hints that will matter later. 1, I installed a Ring doorbell on my parents' porch because I am the person who does that kind of thing, and because I believed security is an act of love. 2, the family dinner chat held more than jokes. It held timestamps and tone, and one day, it would host the most humiliating sentence my mother ever sent me. 3, Dana Whitmore, a friendly neighborhood realtor, once joked with me about clean title over iced coffee. I did not know then that clean title would become my hill to hold. I am not going to pretend I did not enable this. I did. I wore the label responsible like a medal and forgot that medals can turn into shackles when you never take them off. There's a version of me who believed money could repair the past if I poured enough of it into the cracks. I like her. She tried. But I am not her anymore. This is not a shouting story. It is a paperwork story. It is about how on a sunny afternoon in Newton, the ordinary moment shattered, and how I chose a life-saving decision instead of a meltdown. It is about what happens when you stop arguing with people who rewrite history and start documenting the future instead. If that sounds cold, it is not. It is clear. Clarity is a kind of mercy. And this is where we begin an ordinary family milestone, a shocking interruption, a choice to stay calm, and a promise that a dark truth is about to surface. In a moment, I will show you the sacrifice pattern that made their betrayal possible and how I kept smiling while my savings bled out. Then we will peel back the first breadcrumb. But first, know this, I am telling this story in my voice with my receipts, and the tone is calm because calm is what power sounds like when you stop apologizing. So let's talk about the pattern. Not the drama, not the headlines, the pattern. Because patterns are how you get from one small favor to a life you do not recognize. It started the way storms always start in New England, with a sky that pretends to be harmless. A gas bill that somehow slipped past my parents and landed with a late fee. $98. I paid it and texted a smiley face because I had just become a finance director and it felt good to help. A week later, a copay for an urgent care visit. $42 and change. I told myself this is what daughters do. You show up, you smooth edges, you do not make it a thing. Looking back now, I see the slope. When that tiny gas bill did not break anything, a bigger ask felt reasonable. Property taxes, my dad said. I thought I set up autopay, the penalty is ugly. I moved $2,000 that afternoon and put a reminder on my own calendar for their future due dates because that is what my brain does. It builds guardrails around other people's gaps. The favors multiplied. A slow leak under the kitchen sink turned into a plumber's visit. $450 paid by my card. A water heater that died the week before Christmas demanded a rush replacement. $2,800 plus hot chocolate for the installers because my mother could not find cash and I always have a card. I crawled behind their television to reboot a router, then replaced the router, then added a Wi-Fi mesh and a smarter thermostat because I believed better tech equals fewer frantic calls. If you were raised as the problem solver, you know this well. You throw solutions at anxiety, the way a chef throws salt at bland pasta water. It is fast, it works, and no one questions it until the bag is empty. When my total compensation hit about $520,000, I formalized the help. I took on a reliable share of the mortgage so their month-to-month would not wobble. 40% of my income went home. $208,000 a year. I justified it 6 ways. 1, I travel for work, I can afford it. 2, they gave me everything they could. It is my turn. 3, stability beats chaos, and I have the means to buy stability. Looking back now, I hear how tidy that sounds. Tidy can be dangerous when it hides a wound. The ledger grew without me calling it a ledger. I opened a folder in Google Drive named Household Stabilizations and started dropping evidence in like it was confetti at the world's dullest parade. Bank exports month by month. Receipts in neat stacks, photos of the new roof after a windstorm peeled shingles off like they were Post-it notes. That roof, $12,000 down then, staged payment. Payments that totaled more than $20,000. Windows that leaked in a nor'easter, an $8,000 deposit, then more. A carpenter to rebuild the back stairs after a cousin slipped, $2,300. A painter to redo the living room because my mother said the old color felt sad, $1,400. And me holding a ladder because the painter was late and I cannot watch a project stall without jumping in. I added my mother as a supplemental user on one of my credit cards so she could buy gifts without humiliation. I told her, use it for family birthdays, do not stress. She kissed my cheek. She called me her lifesaver. The first month was small, $112. The holiday months were not. Looking back now, I can see the line where generosity turned into structure and the line where structure turned into expectation. Those lines are thin when you love people who are used to being rescued. The family dynamic made it easy to rationalize. Tyler, my younger brother, is sunshine with a short attention span. He was always the golden child. If he missed a deadline, my mother laughed and said, "Your brother is too creative for paperwork. If I missed a deadline, it meant something was wrong with me." So I did not miss deadlines. I built a reputation out of competence, and the family learned to use that reputation like a credit line. When Tyler wanted wheels, the conversation did not start at can Tyler afford a car? It started at Madison, your insurance rate is better. Can we put him on your policy for a year or two? Then Madison, can you co-sign because the dealer said it would lower the monthly payment? Later, the word co-sign became a joke because I had learned how to say no to loans, but not soon enough to avoid my name appearing on a title once for insurance purposes only. Not the loan, the title. I had not realized yet how a harmless signature can become a lever in the wrong hands. That detail will matter later. I wish it did not, but it will. At holidays, the script was rehearsed. I would arrive with bakery boxes and a spreadsheet in my head. My mother would pour wine and tell the room my latest promotion as if it were a family trophy. Tyler would say, if I wanted to do what Maddie does, I could, I just choose happiness. Everyone laughed. I laughed too because it seemed mean not to, and because I did not want to be the serious one again. Looking back now, every joke was a little receipt. The ledger was not only money, it was tone. Callie, my best friend, saw it early. She is a reporter, the anchor in my life who wraps truth in kindness. She would ask, are you keeping track not to scold me but to hand me a mirror? Evan, my colleague, the validator, asked a different question. If this were a client, what would you advise? I always had a crisp answer for clients. I did not have one for myself yet. That gap is where families can grow their favorite myths. The months clicked by. 26 months of support, roughly $450,000 in total. 70% of what any rational person would have saved by then. I remind you of that sum not to brag or to paint myself as a martyr, but because the math explains the next choices. It explains why a court later cared. Courts do not rule on vibes, they rule on evidence. There were sweet moments that kept me in the loop. My dad calling to say the basement no longer smelled like damp cardboard after the sump pump replacement. My mother texting a heart after a grocery delivery hit the porch on a snow day. Tyler posting a photo of brunch with a caption about family blessings and his wristwatch catching the light. I kept telling myself I was investing in peace. I did not see that I was financing leverage against myself. Looking back now, that phrase keeps showing up because it is the only honest way to talk about long patterns. Looking back now, the three biggest breadcrumbs were sitting in plain sight. One, that Ring doorbell, which I installed because I am the person who sets up the tech. Two, the family dinner chat. 24 relatives deep a messy archive of small nothings and eventually one very loud something. 3, a conversation with Dana Whitmore, a neighborhood realtor with a friendly laugh who once told me over iced coffee that clean title makes everything easier. She meant it as general advice. I heard it as trivia. I would hear it again as a warning. There were also the phrases my mother used that did not sound like warnings until later. We will handle it, sweetheart. We have it covered. We will take it from here. At first, those lines felt like relief. Finally, I thought they are taking responsibility. Later, I learned the grammar mattered. We did not include me. If you are keeping track, here is the emotional ledger alongside the financial one. Pride balanced guilt. Love balanced exhaustion. Hope balanced willful blindness. And under those, a steady drum of rationalizations. I do not have kids yet. I can afford it. I am paying forward. I am preventing a crisis. It is easier if I do it. Every one of those sentences can be true and still be a trap. I want to be fair to the earlier version of myself. She was not stupid. She was loyal. She believed that putting out fires was a way to keep a home warm. She did not understand yet that some people learn to love the warmth without learning to tend the fire. Looking back now, that may be the most painful part. Not the money, the lesson. And to be fair to my parents, I believe they told themselves a story too. In their story, I am wildly competent, borderline indestructible. In their story, help does not hurt me. It flows through me like water through a pipe. In their story, the house exists because of me, so, of course, I will always maintain it. The problem is, stories become policy when nobody questions them, and policy becomes entitlement when nobody sets a boundary. I kept smoothing, paying, fixing. I did not know that a sunny afternoon in Newton would turn all those small kindnesses into weaponized gratitude. I did not know a single text could collapse 26 months of support into one brutal sentence. I did not know yet, but I was about to. In a moment, I will show you the first crack that let the truth in a family milestone, a lemon-themed backdrop, a whisper that was not meant for me, and a text that felt like a locked door across my ribs. Before that, one more looking back now. Looking back now, I can see the mistake I kept making. I treated love like a subsidy, not a relationship. Subsidies can be cut. Relationships need consent. When you confuse the two, you make it very easy for someone else to confuse ownership with access. Hold that thought. Keep the ledger in mind. Keep the Ring doorbell in mind. Keep the family dinner chat in mind. Because the next part is where suspicion stops being a feeling and starts becoming a file. Suspicion stopped being a feeling and started becoming a file on a Saturday in Newton under a lemon yellow banner and a rented photo backdrop. It was my cousin's baby shower. Backyard white folding chairs, mason jars with paper straws. The family dinner group chat, 24 relatives deep, was buzzing about cupcakes and centerpieces. I showed up with non-alcoholic cider because not everyone drinks, and because I am the person who thinks about edges. My mother, Patricia Pat, worked the patio like a hostess on television. Tyler told jokes. Everyone glowed. Breadcrumb 1 landed while people were cooing over a onesie shaped like a lemon. I caught Tyler leaning toward my aunt, voice pitched low, casual, in the way only rehearsed lines sound. After the power of attorney, the deed will be easy. 9 words. A chill. I turned like I had misheard. He was already grinning for a group photo. I filed it under maybe I am being dramatic. That is the trap when you have been called dramatic. You cross-examine yourself before you question the facts. Breadcrumb 2 arrived 10 minutes later. Dana Whitmore, the neighborhood realtor with the friendly laugh, was chatting about the market. She said in this zip code, clean title still moves. She was not talking about my parents' place, it was a general comment, but the phrase lodged like a splinter. Clean title. Why was title in my head at a baby shower? I helped carry gifts inside. The kitchen smelled like vanilla and lemon rind. My mother squeezed my arm and said, "We have it covered, sweetheart." I wanted to believe her. I wanted to hand off the mental load and just be a daughter for once. Breadcrumb 3 detonated that night in the family dinner chat where casseroles and chaos share the same thread. A message from my mother popped up for 24 relatives to see. Changed all the locks. Come home and see. Then a grin sticker. It read like a dare and felt like a door closing inside my chest. I stared at the screen until the words went blurry. Then I took a breath and did the thing I do when panic tries to take the wheel. I called Evan. Evan Park is my colleague and my validator, the friend who translates adrenaline into action. He picked up on the first ring. Do not confront, he said, voice calm, metronome, steady. Document, pull your bank exports, pull the ring clips, this is important. We will line up the facts before we line up the feelings. So I drove to my parents' house with an overnight bag and a lime green toolbox because old habits are stubborn. The porch light was on. The keypad blinked like it had forgotten me. No code worked. The Ring camera watched me try and fail and step back. 2 houses down the neighborhood, Cat paused like a tiny ref and then kept walking. I did not bang. I did not call. I let the camera record me leaving because the story needed clean edges. In the Ring app, an earlier clip waited like a loaded sentence. 2 days before the party. My mother and Tyler on the porch, voices low, words careful. Temporary authorization. Agent, once it is in our names, not in our as in mine and theirs, in ours as in theirs. The clip ended with my mother saying, Madison will be fine. She always is. I felt heat climb my neck. Not anger yet, not grief. The feeling before both when your body knows the truth and your mind tries to catch up. I went to Callie's apartment instead of picking a fight at midnight. I sat at her kitchen island and opened my laptop. Before I called any lawyer, before I sent any message, I did the thing my job trained me to do. I built the file. First, the money. I exported 26 months of bank transfers. Line by line, I labeled every support payment and repair. 40% of my total compensation, about $520,000 a year, had gone home. That is $208,000 a year. Over 26 months, the support added up to roughly $450,000. Not a typo, not a vague estimate, a number I could show a judge without blinking. I added line items because details matter. Roof-staged payments totaling more than $20,000. Windows deposits and balances crossing $8,000. Water heater, $2,800. Backstair rebuild after a fall, $2,300. Painter, $1,400. Grocery deliveries on snow days. Utility payments when autopay failed on their end. A supplemental card for my mother so birthdays did not become shame. Love is ledger. Breadcrumb 4 slid in through the side door while I was sorting receipts. A shared family cloud folder pinged an update. The name looked harmless, taxes 2024. Inside, among W-2 scans and donation receipts, sat a PDF labeled Draft POA. I should not have had access. Someone had toggled permissions without understanding them. I clicked. On the screen, a drafted power of attorney naming my father as principal, my mother as agent, and Tyler as successor agent with authority boxes checked for certain property transactions. A notary block waited at the bottom with a date the following week. If you have never felt your heart and your head hit the same conclusion at the exact same time, it is like a bell inside you finally getting permission to ring. There it was, not a feeling, not a family shrug, a plan. I took screenshots. I saved the PDF. I noted the metadata because metadata tells its own truth: creation date, modification date, who touched it last. I did not guess. I did not assume. I wrote it down. Breadcrumb 5. Because in a story like this, you collect them every few minutes, was a text from Dana after the party. Random thought she wrote: if your folks ever need a referral for a title attorney, I know a great one. It was kind. It was also accidental confirmation that conversations were happening without me. I did not respond. The urge to be polite is a powerful drug. I let it pass. By dawn, the file was a living thing. Ring transcripts exported, bank spreadsheets cleaned, screenshots of the family chat saved, including the lock message and the grin sticker complete with timestamps and audience count. I stapled my sanity to those timestamps. When people start rewriting history, dates are an antidote. If you are listening and whispering to yourself, confront them, I hear you. I wanted to. But here is the shift. I was done auditioning for the role of reasonable daughter in a play I did not write. I was done giving them the scene they wanted me flailing them, soothing the mediator later, calling it a miscommunication. This is the part where I moved from suspicion to certainty without giving anyone a chance to flip the script. One more breadcrumb, because every 60 seconds matters in a discovery spiral. I opened my email and found an automated notice from my bank flagging unusual activity on a joint savings account I had opened years earlier for emergencies and never used for myself. A small transfer out. Not huge. Small enough to look like nothing. Big enough to prove access I had not authorized. I froze the account and took a screenshot of the freeze confirmation. Not to act yet. To preserve the state of the world exactly as it was. Then I called Evan back. He listened without interrupting while I laid out the numbers, the ring clip, the shared PDF, the lock text. He said 3 sentences. You have enough. You are not crazy. Next step is counsel. I looked at the clock. I looked at the folder. I looked at the lemon yellow ribbon still tied to my wrist from the party. That was the moment suspicion became certainty. Not because of one gut punch, because a pattern I had been funding finally introduced itself with paperwork. In a minute, I will tell you about the morning I sat across from a litigator and slid that file across a walnut table. I will tell you how a calm voice and a few Latin phrases changed the temperature of my entire life. But before the law, there was this choice: no confrontation, no theatrics, no more begging people who benefit from your confusion to clarify their intentions. Just facts. Just timestamps. Just the quiet math of what happened and when. That is how betrayal becomes visible. Not as a shout, as a spreadsheet. I did not sleep. I watched the sky lighten over Boston while the folder on my laptop filled with proof. By dawn, suspicion had a spine. Before I called anyone, I needed one more thing: the moment when your body and your brain agree on the same truth. That is the switch you flip once. After that, you do not go back. I drove to Newton while the streets were still quiet. The lemon ribbon from the shower was still tied to my wrist, frayed at the end where someone had tugged it into a bow. The house looked ordinary in the way a stage looks ordinary before a curtain rises. I stood at the edge of the driveway and let my flats sink into the loose gravel. Somewhere a sprinkler ticked. Somewhere a neighbor's dog announced the morning. The air smelled like wet stone and cut grass. It felt almost unfair that the world could be this calm while my family plotted a transfer of power like it was a casual errand. This is where the 3-layer reveal clicked into place. Surface first, the lock text, changed all the locks, come home and see. The grin sticker. That was not miscommunication. That was a move. Take away access, provoke a scene, call it drama when I react, then use the reaction as proof I cannot be trusted with decisions. If you have lived inside someone else's narrative, you know that playbook. Create chaos, assign blame, keep control. Deeper next. The conspiracy. Not a thriller word, a legal one. A drafted power of attorney sat inside a shared family folder because someone toggled cloud permissions wrong. It named my father as principal, my mother as agent, and Tyler as successor agent with boxes checked for specific property powers. A neighborhood realtor had mentioned clean title in passing and later texted me unprompted about a great title attorney if my folks ever needed a referral. Meanwhile, a small transfer flickered out of a joint savings account I had opened for emergencies and never touched for myself. Each piece alone could be explained away. Together they formed a straight line drawn under the house with me on the wrong side of it. Then the pattern, the part my heart already knew. The months I had funded repairs and taxes, the quieter moments when my mother said, "We will take it from here," and I mistook that for relief. The way Tyler joked about choosing happiness while I quietly chose responsibility. The way I allowed my reputation to become the family's revolving door, and none of that made me guilty. It made me useful. And usefulness, when you never set a price, invites entitlement. I stood there and let all three layers stack the act, the plan, the history. I did not cry. I did not narrate it to myself like a movie. I just breathed until the facts settled into place like dishes in a cabinet. The wind lifted the lemon ribbon on my wrist and it brushed my skin. My hands stopped shaking. This is important. Awakening is not rage. Awakening is clarity. It is the moment you realize you are not a character in their story anymore. You are the author of the next chapter. So I made a quiet decision that felt like stepping onto dry land after treading water far too long. No confrontation, no late-night calls that could be spun as hysteria, no more giving away the advantage of surprise. From this point forward, every action would be deliberate, documented, and boring enough to survive a courtroom. I drove back to Boston and opened the folder again, not to feed my anger, but to organize. The ring clip with the line "Once it is in our names" sat next to the lock text with a timestamp and the grin sticker. The bank export showed 26 months of support, 40% of my compensation, adding up to roughly $450,000 in payments and improvements. The receipts for the roof, the windows, the water heater, the stairs, the paint, each labeled with dates and amounts. The cloud PDF of the draft power of attorney, saved with metadata intact. The small transfer out of the old joint account, frozen with a confirmation screenshot. Every file named, every date written out in words so a judge would not need to squint. I also made a separate note for something that had felt harmless when it happened, and now looked like a lever. Years back, for insurance reasons, only my name had landed on a vehicle title. Not the loan, only the title. I had refused to co-sign financing. That difference matters. It would matter later. I did not yet know how precisely, but I knew enough to mark it. Then I did the smallest thing that changed the most. I wrote a one-page summary in plain language. Not a rant. A narrative anchored to facts. It began with the timeline of support and improvements. It moved to the lockout and the group message. It laid out the discovered draft power of attorney and the realtor's comment about title. It ended with the sentence, "Any litigator wants to read all evidence preserved with original timestamps and unaltered files available on request." I was not trying to sound impressive, I was trying to be clear. As the sun burned through the morning haze, I let myself feel what clarity feels like. It is not triumph. It is not even relief. It is more like quiet. The kind of quiet you get when a storm finally leaves and the power clicks back on. I made tea, I put my phone face down, I sketched the bones of a plan that did not depend on anyone's conscience. 3 steps, 3 words. Preserve, file, protect. Preserve meant every screenshot exported with visible dates, every receipt scanned, every video backed up in 2 places, one of them offline. It meant writing down who had said what and when, not because I needed to remember, but because opposing counsel would one day ask. File meant finding counsel who lived in this world, who understood equitable remedies, and where constructive trust and equitable lien live in the law. Not a generalist, a person who could hear the word lis pendens and not need a primer. I had never said those phrases out loud for my own life before. I whispered them anyway just to feel the edges. Constructive trust, equitable lien, lis pendens. They felt like tools, not threats. Protect meant immediate containment without theatrics. Freeze the old joint account, change passwords. Enable 2-factor on anything that touched money or identity. Audit every place where I had ever been, the helpful one who created logins for convenience. Helpful is a beautiful word until it gets used as a crowbar. The ribbon on my wrist brushed my skin again. I untied it and set it on the counter. I was done letting a party theme narrate my mood. Then I checked my watch and did the next right thing. I found a Boston litigator whose bio read like a table of contents for my situation. Property disputes, title clouds, equitable remedies. I drafted an email with my 1-page summary and the list of attachments, then stopped and called instead. When the receptionist answered, my voice was steady. "I have a documentation package regarding family-funded property improvements, a recent lockout, and a drafted power of attorney I discovered." Through a cloud folder error, I said, "I believe a constructive trust may apply. I would like to schedule a consult." That was it. No adjectives, just nouns and verbs. While I waited for a callback, I walked to the window and watched the harbor wake up. Tugboats pulled in lines. The sky went from gray to a bright, almost unreasonable blue. It reminded me of the driveway earlier, of how the world had the nerve to be beautiful while my life changed shape. I did not resent the blue. It helped to see something uncomplicated. Callie texted a heart and a coffee cup emoji, and I smiled, then put the phone back down. Evan sent a message with 3 words. Paper beats noise. I typed back paper beats noise and silence both. Then I shut the laptop for a beat and let my shoulders drop. If you have ever waited to see whether your life will tilt toward chaos or toward order, you know this hour. You clean a counter that is already clean. You line up things that are already straight. You practice the version of yourself who will sit across from a lawyer and talk like a grown woman about how to take her life back without burning it down. 3 hours later, the callback came and the appointment was set. The walnut table, the measured questions, the Latin phrases, the plan that is next. But the revelation happened here in the space between the driveway and the first consult. The surface betrayal named itself. The deeper plan exposed its paperwork. The pattern admitted how long it had been rehearsed. And I made a choice I could live with. No more begging for clarity, no more performing calm while people pocketed what I paid for. From now on, my tone would match my proof. What they did not know, and what I finally understood, was this: I do not have to fight loud to win. I only have to fight true. In a moment, I will walk you into that office, slide the file across the table, and show you how truth turns into filings, filings turn into leverage, and leverage turns into keys. I walked into the law office carrying a binder that could stand up on its own. Walnut table, legal pads, a litigator with a calm voice and sleeves neatly rolled. I slid the one-page summary across, then the files, ring transcript, group chat screenshots, bank exports showing 26 months of support receipts for the roof windows, water heater stairs, paint, and the draft power of attorney accidentally shared in the cloud. We are not here to vent, I said. We are here to remedy. She nodded once and translated my life into law. We file a lis pendens to cloud the title so the house cannot be sold or transferred. We plead constructive trust and an equitable lien because you maintained and improved the property at significant cost. We request a temporary order that preserves status quo and blocks further interference. All communication moves through counsel, no direct contact. It felt like someone had finally put handrails on a staircase I had been climbing in the dark. I spent that afternoon executing containment. I froze the old joint savings account and saved the freeze confirmation. I turned off my mother's supplemental card with a formal notice sent through the attorney. I canceled every autopay I had set up for their utilities. I changed passwords, enabled two-factor authentication, and audited every place where Helpful Madison had created logins for convenience. Helpful can become a crowbar in the wrong hands. One detail that needed precision years ago: my name landed on a vehicle title for insurance purposes only. Not the loan, only the title. My mother had framed it as a quick paperwork thing. Now missed payments had stacked up. With counsel's guidance, I sent the lender my documentation. The repo truck came quietly on a Tuesday morning and collected a McLaren 720S. It dented Tyler's credit because he was the borrower. Mine stayed intact because I was not. No gloating, just tea and a timestamp. Callie helped me script the public plan in a way that kept me dignified and safe. We built a private Facebook album visible only to extended family. It contained screenshots of the family dinner thread, the lock text with the grin sticker, a clipped segment of the ring transcript where my mother said, "Once it is in our names," and a clean timeline of my payments with dates spelled out. No captions that invited a fight. Only facts. For the professional sphere, we drafted an anonymized LinkedIn post about financial abuse inside families, how to document it, and which safeguards help. No names, faces, blurred, lessons clear. Behind the scenes, Evan pressure tested my numbers. Paper beats noise, he texted. I answered paper beats noise and silence both. The filings went in. The lis pendens landed at the registry like a simple brick in a strategic wall. My attorney set mediation. She reminded me that the goal was remedy, not theater. I nodded. I had no interest in a scene. I wanted keys. Mediation day was beige carpet and a glass pitcher of water. My mother arrived in pearls. Tyler arrived late. The mediator wore a tie with tiny sailboats and asked for opening statements. We went first. My attorney was spare and surgical. For 26 months, my client funded and improved this property, contributing roughly 40% of her compensation, totaling about $450,000 in support and repairs. The other parties changed locks and moved to consolidate control via power of attorney. We are not asking for money. We are asking for the entire house through constructive trust and an equitable lien plus fees and interest as appropriate. Silence. I clicked to a clean dashboard on a small monitor. 3 tabs: transfers, repairs, legal remedies, dates spelled out. The ring transcript rested on the table with a neon flag on the line once it is in our names. The lock text with the grin sticker sat beside it. My mother called me dramatic. Tyler called the camera a violation. The mediator asked whether a front porch is a place with a reasonable expectation of privacy. He did not answer. We took a break. Callie texted a lemon emoji. I smiled in spite of myself and kept breathing. By late afternoon, paper had done what yelling never could. The list pendants held. Their leverage evaporated. The mediated agreement recognized my equitable interest as full. The judge signed off weeks later. By November, a court officer handed me the keys. Clean title, remedy aite praite. Consequences rippled. The private Facebook album fractured the family narrative. Some relatives apologized, others doubled down. I did not campaign for votes. Truth travels on its own. The anonymized LinkedIn post sparked a lunch and learn at work about guarding assets without losing your humanity. HR booked a conference room. I spoke calmly about evidence boundaries and why love needs an audit next to it. 2 weeks after I took possession, my mother left a voicemail from an unfamiliar number. "We miss you, sweetheart. We can talk about sharing the house." I forwarded the audio to my attorney. Our agreement already included a no-contact clause. The court entered it as an order for 6 months. All communication through counsel only. I did not return the call. Dignity is sometimes the discipline not to pick up. Tyler's world shrank in quieter ways. The McLaren was gone. His credit reflected the default. In his friend group, the car became a joke. That part stung to hear about. I did not repeat it. I did not need humiliation. I needed distance. A season later, I closed on a condo in Seaport. Morning light spills across the harbor. I cooked pasta on the first night and ate on the floor with Callie and Evan, laughing about how adulthood sometimes looks like takeout and a perfectly filed binder. I set up the Boundary Scholarship at $50,000 a year for students who pay their own way and still send money home. The prompt is simple. Tell me about the first time you realized you were the net everyone else fell into. Reading those essays felt like opening windows. I see my niece Mia at the park with a cousin sometimes. We talk about books. I keep adult fallout away from her. Innocence does not have to be collateral. Work is steady. My name stayed clean, my credit stayed intact. The story traveled farther than I thought it would, not because I performed it loudly, but because I documented it thoroughly. Looking back now, the arc is simple. Sacrifice, betrayal, awakening, revenge, justice, peace. The lesson is simple too. Generosity without boundaries invites entitlement. Love without documentation invites revision. Calm is not weakness. Calm is what power sounds like when it is finished apologizing. If you have ever had to choose between blood and boundaries, tell me where you are watching from and what choice you made. Someone reading the comments needs your map. And if you want more stories told with receipts and respect, subscribe. I am Madison, and this is how I learned that paper beats noise, that silence can be strategy, and that the right keys sometimes come from a courtroom, not a kitchen drawer. Story 4. By closing day, my stepmother was standing on the sidewalk watching movers carry out the last box from a house she had always called hers. By the time the title officer slid a small envelope across the table to me, her credit cards had stopped working. Her luxury car was scheduled for court-ordered pickup, and 24 relatives had become accidental witnesses to what quiet, final accountability looks like. I am Madison Cole. I am 32. I lead marketing at a fintech in New York, and I used to believe betrayal was a work thing. A missed bonus, a broken promise. Family taught me a different definition. It is the slow way someone treats your effort like an endless tap and your kindness like a signed blank check. What they did not know was this. Months earlier, before my father died, he and I set an iron gate inside the estate. We called it Clause 14. The Cole Family Trust could not sell, lease, or transfer anything without my explicit consent. Wet ink or DocuSign, no exceptions. No consent, no movement. That is not drama, that is paperwork. If you have ever carried a family on your back while they told you it still was not enough, tell me where you are watching from. Because this story is not about shouting in kitchens. It is about patience, documents, and timing. Here's the setup. I live in Westchester and commute into Midtown into a glass box where slide decks and forecasts decide which products live and which quietly fade. My total compensation sits around $600,000, which sounds impressive until you see New York rent taxes and the habit I had of solving other people's emergencies with my debit card. For 2 full years, I covered as much as 40% of my monthly take-home to stabilize the family. That averaged about $20,000 each month. Stack that for 24 months and you are looking at $480,000 that flowed out of my accounts and into obligations I did not create. I kept receipts not for revenge, but because order helps me breathe. The trust holds an Upper West Side brownstone on West 74th Street. It is the kind of place people call timeless because the stoop never learned how to hurry. My father loved that stoop. We wrote thank you notes on it the summer I turned 9. When he got sick, we met with Robert, his attorney, and now mine, and we tuned the trust for storms. Clause 14 for control, clear duties for a trustee, a modest stipend for Vanessa contingent on obeying the covenants. I will explain the stipend later because how we handled it matters. Let me plant a few seeds you will see again. Seed 1. A family group chat where Vanessa typed as if she were doing me a favor. Do not come to the meeting with the lawyer, you are not named. I screenshotted the message and said nothing. Seed 2. A Ring doorbell clip of strangers rolling luggage into the brownstone's side entry. A harried woman telling the camera they were here for an Airbnb. I saved the video and wrote down the time. Seed 3. A DocuSign audit trail showing exactly who had the authority to approve any deal involving trust property. That trail leads to one signature, mine. I did not post any of this at work. I did not feed the rumor mill. I did what professional women learn to do when the air gets thin. I kept moving. I leaned on my best friend Callie, who has a way of putting a steady hand on your shoulder that makes your breath come back. I listened to Robert, who talks like a metronome when things get hot. And I opened the spreadsheet I had kept for years, the one that tracked Venmo transfers, Zelle notes, utility payments, and the endless ordinary little rescues love had taught me to perform without being asked. By closing day, the paper trail did what paper trails do. It told the truth without raising its voice. In a moment, I will show you how the first hint of trouble showed up in an 8-second Instagram story, at my father's memorial brunch, how a broker's assistant became the unlikely revealer, and how the brownstone's front stoop turned into a stage. But first, you need to understand the pattern that made all of this inevitable and why I kept paying until I finally stopped. Before the stoop became a stage and the paperwork did its quiet work, there was a long season of carrying. That is the part people miss when they only see the ending. They see the movers, the envelope, the steady voice. They do not see the years that trained me to be calm. I grew up as the responsible one. My cousin Josh was the golden one. Different parents, same Sunday table, he could arrive late and be greeted like a hero in a movie trailer. I could arrive early with groceries and be handed a list. I learned to take pride in reliability. I did not notice how often reliability becomes invisibility. Vanessa played into that. She had a gift for turning requests into compliments. You are so organized, Madison. Could you set up autopay for the utilities at the brownstone just until we figure out the new system? You are so good with travel points, can I add? Myself as an authorized user on your card, so the house expenses go through one account. You are such a lifesaver. The gardener needs to be paid today and your father is resting. Each sentence sounded like gratitude. Each one was a transfer of labor. Money followed the pattern. My job paid well and New York finds ways to bill you for breathing. Even so, I said yes. For 2 full years, as much as 40% of my monthly take-home went to stabilize the family. That was about $20,000 every month rolling out of my accounts like tides, rent to insurance premiums, utilities that always seem to be urgent. One line item still makes me shake my head. A wellness retreat membership for Vanessa that cost $7,500 per month, billed like a necessity. Another was a stylist package at $4,000 a month. When I hesitated, the tone shifted. It is just for now. Your father cannot handle stress. You are strong. Looking back now, I can see how I trained everyone to expect the rescue. I color-coded the spreadsheet because it soothed me. Blue for housing, green for medical, orange for what I called favors, which were really obligations with a smiley face. I kept notes in the memo lines on Venmo and Zelle, as if future me would someday need a map. I thought I was building clarity. I was building a case without knowing it. My father, Richard Cole, never asked me to be the firefighter. He was a handwritten notes Sunday newspaper kind of man. When he got sick, he tried to keep me out of the storm. He would say, "I am fine, honey," and then add, "Would you be willing to look at this insurance thing?" I would nod because saying no to a man who wrote me lunchbox notes in 4th grade felt wrong. Mr. Alvarez, his longtime assistant, would drop off files with tabbed dividers and a thermos of coffee. Between the two of them, I learned the rhythm of practical love. As my father's health slipped, Vanessa's entitlement settled in like furniture. Little rules started bending. The guest wing at the brownstone, which was always meant for family, became a revolving door. Strangers with roller bags. Whispered plans about covering the mortgage with short-term rentals, even though the trust documents at the time prohibited subleases without trustee approval. At that point, my father was still the acting trustee. I was listed as successor. I did not have the gavel yet, just the habit of keeping the receipts. Looking back now, the signs were everywhere. A broker's card left on the kitchen island with a scribbled note. Quietly, no need to involve Madison. A half-drafted Zillow description in Vanessa's email that she accidentally airdropped to the family iPad. A flutter of credit alerts after she added herself to my travel card without asking. When I confronted her gently, she smiled. "Oh, sweetie, you are so careful. We need someone like you in this family." There was the car, too. A glossy, oversized statement on wheels acquired through an LLC owned by the trust while my father was still alive and serving as trustee. On paper, the vehicle belonged to the trust. In practice, Vanessa had the keys, the garage space, and the photo shoots. I did not sign anything for that purchase because at that time I could not. I was the successor, not the trustee. I did what I had learned to do. I wrote down what I could prove and let the rest sit in a quiet file. Callie watched all this with the eyes of someone who has sat through too many of my late-night recaps. She would say, "You are generous, Mads, but generosity needs edges." I would laugh it off. Boundaries felt like a foreign language I could read but not speak. When I finally told her about the retreat charges and the stylist bill, she raised an eyebrow. "You know, none of that is your job, right?" I knew. I kept paying anyway. I told myself I was buying peace. Looking back now, I can see the moments when I could have pivoted earlier. The Sunday when I found a printed calendar on the brownstone counter with blocked dates labeled Airbnb. The afternoon, a property manager's voicemail mentioned a second set of digital locks that did not match the ones I installed. The evening, Vanessa toasted to family unity while texting a broker about cash buyers. Each clue felt too small to disrupt a meal. Each one made the next one easier to ignore. I am not proud of how long it took, but I am not ashamed either. People who are trained to be steady do not throw down their tools mid-fire. We finish the shift, we file the report, we come back tomorrow. When my father's doctors began using words like palliative and comfort, he asked me to sit with Robert. That was when the estate planning moved from polite to precise. We did not rewrite the world, we clarified it. The Cole family trust was already in place. We added teeth. Clause 14 for consent on any sale, lease, or transfer. A stipend for Vanessa that would exist only if she honored the covenants with a curative period of 30 days if she slipped. If compliance returned within that window, payments would continue. If not, the trust could enforce remedies up to and including sale. It felt clinical and kind at the same time. My father squeezed my hand. He said, "I know you will be fair." I said I will be clear. That is the part nobody posts. The printer jams, the phrases you learn. Curative period. Notice of breach. Successor trustee, escrow. I did not realize then how each term would become a stepping stone. When my father died, the pattern accelerated. Vanessa's texts came faster and louder, except the volume was never in decibels. It was in assumptions. Do not come to the meeting. You are not named. We will put the house on the market before spring. There is a buyer who does not need all the paperwork. She forgot that the kind of buyers who skip paperwork do not make it to the closing table in New York. She also forgot that I do not argue when documentation will do. Looking back now, I see why the ending looked inevitable. I had 2 years of spreadsheets tracing my sacrifices to the penny. I had a trust with clear language and a role that carried legal duty, not just emotional weight. I had a best friend who kept my feet on the ground and a lawyer who knew how to turn paper into action. Most of all, I had finally stopped buying peace and started enforcing boundaries. That is why the next part unfolded the way it did. The discovery did not arrive as a single bombshell. It arrived as a chain of small, undeniable things. An 8-second Instagram story at the memorial brunch. A text from a broker's assistant who chose ethics over drama. A ring notification at the exact wrong time for Vanessa and the exact right time for the truth. And a spreadsheet patient and unblinking, ready to become evidence. Now that you understand the pattern I lived inside, the next turn will make sense. This is where suspicion becomes certainty, where breadcrumbs become a map, and where the quiet person in the room decides to stop being the safety net and start being the trustee. Suspicion did not arrive like a thunderclap. It came as a flicker on a screen, a phrase with a sharp edge, a tiny thing that would have been easy to ignore if I were not already trained to watch the details. The memorial brunch was soft lighting and white tablecloths, the kind of event where people say the right words and refill your water without asking. Someone put together a slideshow. People hugged too long. I slipped outside to breathe. That is when my phone buzzed with an 8-second Instagram story from a younger cousin. It was a wide pan of the room just long enough to catch Vanessa's smile and a line of champagne glasses. Her voice carried over the clink of flatware. Madison will not be getting anything. 8 seconds, 8 words that did not fit the day. My first instinct was to excuse it. Grief makes people careless. Maybe she meant something else. I tucked the phone away and went back inside. 2 minutes later, Aunt Elise texted me a screenshot from the family group chat. Vanessa had typed, "Consider this a courtesy. Madison is not named and does not need to attend the meeting with the lawyer." A couple of relatives reacted with little hearts and thumbs up the way people do when they are glancing at their phones and not thinking about what clicks can mean. The timestamp landed like a thumbprint. I did not reply. This is important. I took a screenshot, emailed it to myself, and added a note: memorial brunch group chat exclusion. On my way to the coat check, I paused behind a partially closed door. A voice I knew too well. Vanessa, low and sure. "We do not need her consent. My friend can post it quietly. Cash buyers will not ask for all that paperwork." Another voice murmured something I could not hear. Vanessa again. "She is only the successor. She has no idea how this works." I stood very still. Successor meant I would step in as trustee after my father's death. She was either bluffing or misinformed. Either way, I had heard enough. I walked out without a scene. In the car, I called Robert. He answered on the second ring with that steady metronome voice. I told him about the story. I told him about the group chat. I told him about the overheard conversation. He said, "Come in first thing in the morning, bring your notes, bring your spreadsheet. We will handle facts, not fumes." That night, I opened the spreadsheet that had lived quietly on my laptop for 2 years. Color-coded tabs, blue for housing, green for medical, orange for what I had labeled favors, which were really obligations with a smiley face. I scrolled through the Venmo and Zelle logs. $20,000 here, $18,000 there. Week after week, month after month. I was no longer numb to it. I was taking inventory. Then came the message that shifted the ground from soft to firm. An unknown number texted a photo of a draft Zillow listing. The image showed an Upper West Side brownstone description with all the rough edges of a first pass. No price, no trustee consent, notes in the margin about staging. The text said, "She asked me to list without trustee approval. I am out. You should know." It was the assistant to a broker Vanessa had been flattering in holiday toasts. We had never met. She did not sign her name. She did not need to. The metadata on the photo told me enough it came from inside the brokerage taken that afternoon. I replied with a single line. "Thank you." Then I forwarded it to Robert and added context. Timeline, contact, my role. He wrote back within 5 minutes. Title will not close without trustee consent. Keep gathering. This next part matters. The next breadcrumb arrived as a Ring doorbell alert. At 9:32 p.m., the camera at the brownstone pinged with motion. 2 travelers with roller bags came into frame, scrolling on their phones as if matching a code to a lock. One looked up at the camera and said, "We are here for the Airbnb booking." The host said, "Side entrance." The date stamp burned into my eyes. I saved the clip and wrote the time on a sticky note that I stuck to my wallet. I am not sure why. Maybe I needed to feel the weight of it in my pocket. Callie called just as I dropped the note back in. "You good?" Her voice always lands like a hand to a shoulder. I told her what I had. The story, the group chat, the overheard conversation, the draft listing, the Ring clip. She listened without interrupting. Then she said, "Okay. This is not noise. This is evidence. Tomorrow you sit with Robert and you turn this into a plan. Tonight you eat something and sleep." I laughed because it felt like a script and because she was right. Morning came with a gray sky and a crowded train. In Robert's office, I laid out the spreadsheet, the screenshots, the Ring clip, and the draft listing photo. He pulled a legal pad close and began translating everything into structured steps. He asked narrow questions. Dates, times, who sent what. He wrote Clause 14 at the top of the page and underlined it twice. Then he asked for the DocuSign audit trail on the trust documents because audit trails do not have opinions. They have timestamps and IP addresses. We pulled it up together. There it was, the specific language stating that any sale, lease, or transfer of trust property required the trustee's express consent. Not the family's consent, not a verbal nod, the trustee's written approval. At that moment, because my father had passed, the trustee was me. Robert nodded, then pivoted to the car, the Bentley that had looked like a costume for months. He confirmed the title sat with the LLC owned by the Cole Family Trust. Because my father had purchased it while he was serving as trustee, there was nothing improper about the acquisition itself. But possession now mattered. Vanessa had keys and control without authority. That is not a repossession scenario, Robert said. That is replevin. Court order for return to the rightful owner. No drama, just law. I felt something harden in my chest. Not anger, alignment. We moved to the real estate angle. Robert looped in a colleague who handled title insurance. She explained calmly that no reputable title company in New York will insure a transfer without the trustee's written consent when a trust owns the property. Even a cash buyer cannot skip that. If a broker tried to list without the consent, the managing broker would be on the hook once counsel was notified. Quietly, firmly, the system would hold. This is important. We did not plan a spectacle. We planned a sequence. Step 1, document. The breach, the unauthorized short-term rental of the guest wing, captured on Ring and confirmed through the booking platform's messages that we would request through counsel. Step 2, serve a notice of breach to Vanessa citing the trust covenants and providing a curative period of 30 days. During that period, stipends would be placed into escrow, not canceled, because we would follow the terms we set. Step 3, notify the managing broker and the platform with copies of the trust language and my trustee letterhead. Step 4, prepare the replevin filing for the vehicle. Step 5, keep the circle small and the tone professional. Before I left, Robert asked one more question. Are you prepared for pushback from family who did not read the documents and will only hear one loud version? I said yes. He raised an eyebrow. I repeated it. Yes, calmly this time. He smiled the kind of smile lawyers allow themselves when a client is ready to do the boring right thing. On the sidewalk outside the city sounded like itself. Cabs? Steam grates? Someone arguing into a headset about a deck that would never get approved. I checked my phone. Another message from the broker's assistant waited in my inbox. A forwarded email thread in which Vanessa had written, "We can list without Madison. My friend says if we get an offer, it is too late to stop." The assistant had responded, "That is not how this works. Title will refuse." The managing broker chimed in with a final line. "Do not move forward without trustee consent." Breadcrumbs were no longer breadcrumbs, they were a chain. What they did not know was that I had finally stopped trying to buy peace. I was done rescuing feelings. I was ready to enforce boundaries exactly the way we designed them. The next step would take place in a quiet room with leather chairs and a stack of documents. Not a dramatic reading, because that is not real life, but a meeting where words like successor, trustee, and fiduciary duty would turn into sentences that could not be argued with. The meeting was not a performance. No oak-paneled theater. Just a quiet conference room, a window that faced the kind of New York sky that pretends not to notice anyone's problems, and a stack of files that smelled faintly of paper and toner. The air conditioner hummed. A clock ticked in the hallway. Callie sat to my left, one hand on a legal pad, one hand close enough to touch. Robert opened a binder and began to read in a voice so steady it could have been a metronome. Here is the surface betrayal, clean and simple. The Cole family trust remains in full effect. Upon the death of Richard Cole, the successor trustee becomes the acting trustee. That is me. Any sale, lease, or transfer of trust property requires the trustee's express written consent. That is Clause 14. Vanessa receives a stipend of $100,000 per year, payable monthly contingent on compliance with all covenants, with a curative period of 30 days for any breach. If the breach is not cured within 30 days, remedies include withholding escrow clawback and, if necessary, sale to protect the corpus of the trust. Robert did not look up. He did not need to. The words did the work. Vanessa shifted in her chair. She tried a small laugh that wanted to be a scoff. "This is ridiculous," she said. She actually said the word ridiculous, as if the law were a rumor and not a document we all could read. Robert kept reading. I watched his finger trace each line. When he reached the part about trustee consent, he paused, turned the page, and placed a printed DocuSign audit trail on the table. It showed exactly who had signing authority and when it had been used. There was one signature that mattered for any future transaction involving the brownstone on West 74th Street. Mine. The room went quiet in a way that feels like pressure in your ears on a plane. My heartbeat sounded loud to me and probably to no one else. I kept my face still. Callie's hand found my wrist and grounded me. In that small silence, I felt something in me shift from defense to direction. Now the deeper conspiracy. Robert slid over a forwarded email thread from the brokerage. The subject line read, "Draft listing internal." The broker's assistant, the same one who had texted me the photo, had escalated the issue to her managing broker. Her note was short. Client insists trustee consent is not required. Requests off-market showings. The managing broker's reply was shorter. Do not move forward without trustee consent. Attached was my title colleague's memo explaining why no reputable title company in New York would ensure a transfer of a trust-owned property without a trustee's signed approval. Even a cash buyer cannot skip that. The chain was informative and damning without a single dramatic adjective. Then Robert placed a second folder on the table, screenshots from the booking platform obtained through counsel. The dates lined up with the Ring doorbell clip. Guests for the guest wing. Entry codes generated for stays that were not allowed under the trust covenants. Payments received. The pattern was not a misunderstanding. It was a plan to monetize a property that Vanessa did not control and to do it quietly until it became a fait accompli. I added my own exhibits like puzzle pieces dropping into place. The Instagram story from the memorial brunch, 8 seconds, 1 sentence. The group chat message telling me not to come to the meeting because I was not named. The overheard conversation about cash buyers who would not ask for paperwork, the kind of wishful thinking that works only on television. My spreadsheet color-coded translating 2 years of what I had paid and why. Every breadcrumb I had pocketed turned into a line on a timeline. Now the recognition of the pattern, the part that reaches back before the day of the meeting. While my father was sick and still serving as trustee, small lines were being crossed like it was a sport. Add yourself to her card. Switch utilities to her autopay. Float the idea of a quiet listing. Try a short-term rental as a test. Each step tried to turn a hard boundary into decoration. It was not one choice, it was a series. A practiced rhythm of entitlement that counted on me not wanting to make a scene. A strange calm came over me as the pieces aligned. I remember the way sunlight landed on the brass corner of Robert's binder. I remember the faint scratch of his pen when he wrote Clause 14 compliance escrow in neat block letters at the top of a legal pad. I remember the sky being an almost cheerful blue, as if to make a point that the world does not pause for anyone's revelation. My lungs did that tight thing grief makes them do, then eased. I was not drowning, I was finally standing up. Callie leaned in and whispered, "You built this." "Now trust it." Her voice was steady, not sweet. It helped. Vanessa tried one more angle. "Family should not do this to family," she said. A line she liked to use when rules inconvenienced her. I kept my tone even. Family should not break the rules and call it love. Then I turned to Robert. "Please proceed." That was the moment the surface, the conspiracy, and the pattern fused into a decision. We were not going to debate feelings. We were going to follow the plan we had already sketched in Part 3 and execute it with care. Robert summarized the next steps so there would be no misunderstanding. First issue, a notice of breach regarding the unauthorized short-term rentals citing dates, times, and the specific covenant violated. Provide a curative period of 30 days, and during that period place stipend payments into escrow exactly as the trust allows. Second, notify the managing broker and the platform in writing, enclosing the trust language and my trustee letterhead so there would be no more quiet attempts to list. Third, prepare the relevant filing for the vehicle titled to the trust-owned LLC, no confrontation, just a court order to return property to its lawful owner. Fourth, keep our communications professional and measured. Paper, not volume. The clarity landed like a leveled picture frame. Everything straight, everything where it belonged. No heroics, no speeches, just a path. As we stood to leave, Robert handed me a thin folder. Inside was a one-page summary of my duties as trustee, printed in a font large enough to read in a hurry. Fiduciary duty. Prudence. Loyalty. Impartiality. It was not poetry, but it was beautiful in its own way, a promise about how power should behave. Out on the sidewalk, the city sounded exactly like it had an hour earlier. Cabs, a bus sighing to a stop, someone laughing too loud at a joke not worth it. I looked up at that bright, indifferent sky and felt ready. Not to fight, to enforce. The awakening was not me becoming someone new. It was me becoming who the documents already said I was. The revelation was not a twist. It was the obvious truth finally allowed to take up space. And the next move would not require anger. It would require letters, signatures, and a calendar. That is where the retaliation begins, calm, sequential, and entirely within the rules we set. In the very next part, we serve the notice, set the escrow alert, the broker, and file for replevien. No shouting, no surprises, just consequences moving step by careful step toward a day when the stoop on West 74th Street would see a moving truck, and the truth would be visible in daylight. Awakening is a feeling. Retaliation is a calendar. We started the same afternoon as the meeting. Robert drafted a notice of breach that read like a map, dates and times from the ring clip, booking confirmations pulled through counsel, the specific covenant in the Cole family trust that barred short-term rentals without trustee approval. At the bottom, a clear instruction, a curative period of 30 days. During that window, Vanessa's stipend, $100,000 per year paid monthly, would sit in escrow. Cure the breach and payments resume. Ignore it and remedies follow. No heat, only terms. A process server delivered the notice. I did not add a note. I did not add a glare. I let the letter speak. In parallel, we contained real estate risk. Robert's colleague emailed the managing broker and the platform with my trustee letterhead and the relevant trust pages attached. The subject line was unglamorous consent requirement under Clause 14. The managing broker withdrew the draft listing within the hour. The platform acknowledged receipt and disabled the host profile tied to the guest wing. Title's underwriting team circulated a memo, "Do not open title on the brownstone without the trustee's written consent." The machine that had been humming in the background went quiet. Then we cleaned the money trail. I removed every authorized user Vanessa had added. I canceled autopays created without my consent. Robert submitted targeted reversal requests for recent transfers where the memos and timing suggested error or pressure. Some returned, some did not. That was fine. The point was not recoupment. The point was boundary. I opened a dedicated trust email for all future approvals and locked down DocuSign with two-factor authentication because audit trails are only as strong as the gate in front of them. Next came the vehicle. Because the Bentley sat on the books of an LLC owned by the trust and because Vanessa possessed it without authority, Robert filed for replevin. No dramatics, a short hearing, an order directing a peaceful recovery to return the car to the lawful owner. Pickup was scheduled for the morning of the closing window so we would not waste an hour of anyone's time. Callie joked that my superpower was turning plot points into calendar invites. She was not wrong. Throughout, I kept communications narrow and professional. No social posts, no Slack gossip. When family members texted with questions shaped like accusations, I replied with one line, "Please direct any questions to counsel." When one cousin wrote, "You are going to ruin her life," I wrote back, "I am enforcing the documents we all benefited from." Then I put my phone down and went for a run I did not enjoy. Halfway through the curative period, Vanessa tried to argue the facts by changing the setting. She held a small cocktail hour and told relatives I had frozen her money and stolen her home. I did not attend. The next morning, our counsel sent a courteous reminder of the cure path with screenshots of the booking messages and stills from the ring clip. Facts are impolite only to people who need noise. On day 29, nothing had changed. Guests still arrived at the side door with roller bags. The listing remained disabled, but the behavior continued. On day 30, Robert sent the notice of default and right of sale under the trust. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. The letter carried enough weight on its own. We listed properly with a broker who respected the paperwork. Showings were scheduled. A buyer who understood trusts and townhouses made a clean offer. Title opened with the trustee's consent on my letterhead. I signed in wet ink and on DocuSign because belt and suspenders is not a cliche in my world. We set a closing date. The calendar once more did the heavy lifting. What they did not know was that the quiet path is the shortest path when the law is on your side. The curative period closed. The listing closed. And then finally, the house closed. Closing day did not announce itself. It arrived like weather. The buyer's attorney reviewed final signatures. The title officer slid the envelope across the table. I initialed where I was told signed where the trust required and handed over the trustee consent that had made the entire sale possible. Outside, a moving truck eased into a space the neighbors had politely saved with 2 trash cans and a note. Vanessa had spent the week sending texts that combined outrage with invitation. "Be here at noon. Watch her throw me out." Many came. A small crowd formed because that is what families and neighborhoods do when rumors become errands. The movers worked with the same efficiency as always. Wrap, lift, label, stairs. A deputy arrived at the curb at the time stamped on the replevin order. The recovery team rolled up with a trailer and calm faces. The driver spoke to the deputy, then to Vanessa, then to me. "Ma'am, we will handle this carefully." He did. The car that had always looked like a costume rode away as quietly as a secret finally told. Vanessa took off her sunglasses and tried one more script. "Family should not do this to family." I kept my tone even. "Family should not ignore the rules and call it love." I handed her an envelope. Inside were two documents. The first set out the stipend escrow and the path to resume payments prospectively if she complied with the covenants and maintained no contact. The second was the non-contact notice itself, boring, clear, signed. Boring, clear. There was no shouting match. There was the sound of packing tape and summer air and a neighbor's dog trying to understand human sadness. The relatives who had arrived ready for a spectacle saw a process. A few came over to hug me. A few looked at their shoes. One uncle muttered, "I did not know it worked like this." I nodded. Most people do not until they have to. The professional consequences landed where they belonged. The brokerage reminded its agents about trustee consent. The platform reviewed its host screening. The title company added a training slide about trusts. No one blacklisted Vanessa. No one needed to. Systems remember. Whisper networks adjust. Vanity lifestyles collapse when the credit that props them up meets a wall built from documents. By sunset, the brownstone on West 74th Street belonged to a family who had fallen in love with the stoop for the same reason my father had. The proceeds moved exactly where the trust directed. The keys changed hands. The crowd thinned. The deputy tipped his cap. I breathed. Justice did not feel like triumph. It felt like alignment. A few months later, I stood at a small scholarship gala with my father's name on a banner and a glass of sparkling water in my hand. The first award went to a student who worked 2 jobs and still built a campus food pantry on weekends. She accepted the check with a steady smile that reminded me of the girl I used to be when reliability felt like invisibility. Mr. Alvarez told a story about my dad's habit of leaving handwritten thank you notes for the night crew. People laughed gently. Callie squeezed my shoulder. We did not talk about the brownstone or the car. We did not need to. The room knew the kind of story this was. I stepped to the mic and kept it simple. Justice does not need to be loud. It needs documents, signatures, and timing. Love is not the same as surrender. Boundaries are instructions for where love can go and still be love. If you have ever had to choose your peace over somebody else's comfort, you know this feeling. Tell me where you are watching from. And if you want more stories like this, calm, documented, and true, you know how to subscribe. That was the end of it. Not a door slamming. A door closing with a gentle click that told me it was finally aligned on its hinges. I walked outside. The sky was that same bright,